Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Had a Lost Twin? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Life is not fair, he has always known that. There is no justice for the weak, things are hard for the innocent, it is always a constant war, many things that have no solution or sink into oblivion. Discrimination that burns like third-degree burns, being humiliated by a weak or villain quirk or having none at all. Water droplets slide down the surface of the window, tracing different wet lines on the glass as the storm rages outside. Aizawa Shoyuta, 21-year-old Omega, from his position on the hospital bed where she rested, watches the rain pounding against the window of her assigned room. There is nothing interesting about it, everything is drab, gray. Where once there were colors, now they are extinguished and faded. Shoyuta, an Omega, an underground pro-hero, has heard a lot, observed a lot, experienced a lot. After all, that comes as not only part of his job, but also part of his own life. He knows the darkest deep down. He faces situations that daylight heroes don't face. He listens more, he knows more. His dark gaze never leaves the window, his ebony hair falls like a curtain to hide part of his face. His heart beats unrestrained, his throat a knot of anguish, torn to shreds. He prays and begs in silence, without a sound, without moving, just still, very still. But not all the knowledge he has acquired would help him soothe the pain he has experienced, would not help him understand the pain tearing at his chest, nor would it help with his torn soul at the prospect of an empty nest, a nest that should have been inhabited. Sour, his smell is so sour it would starve someone of oxygen. He knows it, he might even say it's a smell of death. No, he's not dead, he feels like he is, but he's not. He's just bleeding out, bleeding and bleeding and bleeding nonstop because they're gone. They're gone. Why are they gone? Where are they? How did it happen? Shoyuta didn't care for them, he didn't protect them the way he was supposed to. A fraction of him, that part that is always ruled by logic knows it's not his fault, he was helpless, they were supposed to be safe. A hospital, an area designated to pro-heroes, replete with security, replete with verification and organization. It wasn't supposed to happen, it wasn't supposed to ever happen. Everything had gone well, he has arrived with their husbands, their alphas, holding their hands, and as they comforted his constant nerves because they were coming, they were on their way. And then they were in the room, a lot of pain, a lot of screaming, but they did it. They did it. And they were there, small and helpless, crying non-stop like a troubled little pair who gave the doctors no respite. Shoyuta. Oh, Shoyuta couldn't describe that warmth in his chest, that emotion bubbling in his stomach and the surge of love as the two of them were settled in his arms while he had a sweaty forehead and was breathing in agitation. The pain, the nerves, the tiredness and anguish were forgotten when they were in his lap, where they belonged, where they fit perfectly while everything was warm and cool at the same time. He went crazy with love as if for the first time. With giggles and sobs of happiness, he had buried his nose in one of them. Tiny locks of ebony-colored hair like his nose taking in a milky scent combined with a slight hint of the smell of damp earth and jasmine. He had placed a delicate kiss on the little boy's face, his cheeks painted with a constellation of stars, for, oh, those freckles he once had on his own face as a child and faded with time, and to see them now on that sweet face is simply dazzling. He went to delight in the quiet cooing of the little creature, eliciting a coo of his own pure contentment. With a swelling heart, he went on to bury his nose in the second, purple hair, like that of his husband's late mother, wonderful woman who was like a mother to him, tickled him, making him snort a restrained laugh, because, are those unruly locks? Maybe he'd have the horrible habits Shoyuta has with his own hair. He would hum with satisfaction, the sweet milky smell combined with a faint scent of coffee and lavender. Oh, he was dead in love. How could his puppies smell so sweet and tender? How dare they completely disarm him with their soft cooing as they sought comfort in his lap? They were his puppies, his sweet, cute and cuddly puppies, who are and would be loved madly. He loved them so much. I'm sorry, Aizawa. The doctor's face had been full of regret when she entered his room, only an hour after he had caressed his puppies on the cheeks with his wrist, delicately perfuming them on that soft skin. He had allowed his puppies to go in for a checkup while his husbands kept him company to wait for the okay for discharge. And he would be the only one getting the discharge. Shoyuta had tensed in his bed, because those words were not good, that look did not bode well. The smell of the alpha doctor was sour, causing him to almost growl, but his husbands took his hands, both to reassure him and to keep the three of them grounded. Because it was not good, it did not bode well. And then the doctor said it, the words left his lips and Shoyuta screamed. The scream from his throat was heartbreaking, trying to get out of his bed and pounce on the alpha doctor, because missing? What do you mean missing? He would rip his throat out and run to the cribs, because it couldn't be. He had had them in the safety of his arms, his nest was ready and his week free to carry out the printing press, to scent her cubs, to introduce them to the rest of the pack. Missing? Stolen? It took his two mates to hold him, for how could they neglect his cubs? How could they have let them take his cubs? And then it hit so hard, like a strong wave washing over him. He collapsed limply into his husband's arms, and there was no more. Everything was a blur, there was no sense, no direction, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter because his cubs are gone, stolen. Outside he hears chaos, but it doesn't matter, his gaze will remain on the window because he has no strength, he can feel it there, in the empty hole in his chest and the tarnished pieces of his soul. His puppies are already far away, torn from his arms. He is not dead, Shoyuta knows that, but he is bleeding to death. No, life is not fair, it is not merciful. It's cruel, it's merciless, and it's like life doesn't get tired of hitting him over and over again. She howled in frustration, angry at the rain, because of course it had to be on a stormy day when she had to do this, just her DM in luck, or punishment for her actions, because how could she be doing this? The wine coming from the grocery cart she stole from a dingy alley forced her to turn her amber gaze to the pair wrapped in plastic around the cart to keep the water from soaking the black and purple duo. The woman's heart pounded in her throat, the claws of regret clawing at her lungs viciously, but she couldn't not do this, not if she wanted her family to live another day, just a little longer. It was cruel, that person's personal issues and pro-heroes was none of his business, but he ended up in the middle and that was FING bullshit. The phone rang, leading her to hiss another curse before picking it up and taking the call. Got it? The individual asked in a gruff voice, causing her to suddenly shiver, and no, it wasn't from the cold rain. I do, she replied without hesitation, trailing off to another blind spot, away from the camera at the next intersection. That was two, she adds as an afterthought, glancing down once more at the duo snuggled up to each other. Well, make sure you get rid of them. Then she froze, blood boiling in her veins and heart in her throat. What? She questioned very quietly, because what the F dash? I said, end both of their lives and throw them anywhere. I don't care, he says with great disdain and even mockery that make her nauseous. You never told me that's what you do, you said it would be a ransom, a payoff. He gritted his teeth hard, barely leveling his breathing because what the F dash? That hadn't told him, it was a personal vendetta, yes, but it consisted of a kidnapping with ransom demand and safe DLVRY. The puppies would come back, they were supposed to. Do I have to repeat myself? The threat is there, the deal is easy to break, and she is viciously reminded of it, and her heart plummets to the floor, because it's them or her family and she couldn't sacrifice her family. Well, he hums satisfied with her silence, knowing the answer to the unspoken question. And just as that call came it was gone, leaving her blank, in the pouring rain. The sound of police sirens echoed in the distance, just in the direction of the hospital, and she knows she should just get the hell out of there, take care of her job and get on with her life. But she wasn't a killer, much less one who would murder a couple of helpless puppies. Amber Eyes looked back at the pair, her cheeks were wet and for a moment you'd think she was crying, but that wasn't possible and surely rain was involved. None of your business. True, the lives of the pups, the pain of the pro-hero was none of her business. She is doing this for survival, to protect her family. This, she exclaimed in fury, more tears shedding and not just rain. She activated her quirk once more, helping them disappear from the perception of the individuals on the street and ran with her mind at 1,000,000 a minute, thinking, trying. At some point he picked them up in his arms, wrapped them up enough and continued his run to the subway, go farther and farther away from Yuzurifu, at least as far as possible, and follow. 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 No matter if her arms are already cramped, if the puppy's cries make her more nervous, if exhaustion numbs her body, she runs and runs to the place in her mind, memories imbued in that place because she once belonged there herself. On and on and on. She slowed down in front of the place, totally drenched, watching with her heart pounding and almost hyperventilating from lack of air, but there it was, just as she remembered it. She turned her amber eyes once more to the pair, watching their small figures hiccuping and sobbing from the cold. Please don't die of hypothermia, please. She pleads like the hypocrite she is, a cowardly idiot who bows down, but not enough. She runs to the door of the place, lit with a single beacon on its small entrance roof. And she squats down and carefully lays them on the cold floor. Both puppies stir in desperation, pulling their arms out of the blankets and beginning to sob louder. Once again she activates her quirk, this time just for herself in case the door opens. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, she tells them from the bottom of her heart, because this will not let her sleep, this will slowly consume her because these cubs were not even taken to their nest, they were not fully scented and they will not know their pack. These little cubs were ripped from warm and loving arms, all because she was a coward. She looked at the left wrists of each puppy, the plain ribbon with each of their names because at least that will leave them, she will no longer be more heartless than she is being, she can't. I'm so sorry, Izuku Hitoshi, she whispers regretfully to them, finally standing up and leaning to the door, where with her hand made into a fist she slammed the door hard at least 3 times in a row and then turned away. She runs from there, without looking back as she hears a familiar voice exclaim in anguish while the last thing that will drag her away will be the fierce cries of 2 newborn puppies. He recognizes the silence around him as well as the voice that does not want to come out through his lips. Out of popular belief, he can run out of words and be swallowed by silence. Hisashi knows a lot, has seen a lot, has dealt with a lot. He knows the world is not forgiving, it is not easy and can even be cruel. He's a pro-hero of the day, sometimes nights too, hard to believe though it may be, but he likes night patrols, so he's not naive. He has an all, sunshine and rainbows, attitude, but he's not an idiot. He can see the darkness in the light, find the flaws in a whole system established for years. He recognizes the evil in the world and how there is very little leniency. He knows this world, both its flaws and successes, and he always adapts to it no matter what the situation. Because that's what it takes to keep moving, because time waits for no one and will keep moving smoothly. Hisashi knows for a fact that the world is not forgiving, that bad things happen and sometimes they are too much to bear, but to hell with the world when it decides to be cruel in a way that rips your heart out of your chest, in a way that takes all the air out of your lungs and rips your soul to shreds as if it were a piece of old cloth. Sometimes, you won't be able to understand how mankind can be dastardly and ruthless, when you think you would no longer be surprised by anything, something else comes along and twists your stomach. But this was horrible and heartbreaking. His jaw tense, heart in his throat and a static sound in his ears are the least of what registers when the Alpha Doctor apologizes to them and gives them the news. Hisashi can barely process it because he held Izuku in his arms, squealed at the constellation of stars on his cheeks and kissed them with fervor as the pictures of Shoyuta with freckles were just tender and Izuku even seemed to have the hair color of his beloved Omega. The blonde reveled in the scent of his puppy, delighted by the fact that his little eyes' scent was that of damp earth, how oboro, with hints of jasmine. Holding Hitoshi next was winning heaven. That little puppy made him laugh as, could he seriously be frowning so soon? That's a mini Shoyuta. Even with the amount of kisses he spread on his tiny face, the puppy only seemed to frown more as if that was possible. His coffee scent, how Shoyuta, with hints of lavender only led him to joke with his husbands that Hitoshi would only be a miniature Shoyuta, making all 3 of them laugh. All had been happiness and brilliance, all was well. Then it wasn't. Hisashi wanted to rip the throat out of the man and anyone who was supposed to take care of his cubs. How dare they neglect them? How could they possibly allow such an atrocity? Why did they allow their cubs to be stolen? But Hizashi couldn't do it, not when his Shoyuta howled in pain, trying to launch himself from the bed to the doctor even though he was still recovering from childbirth. The tarnished pieces of Hizashi's soul only tore further at the scream of pure agony in the throat of his Sho, who would end up clinging to them as her usually dry eyes let out thick tears. And a protective rage roared in his chest, because they did this, they had a duty to protect their cubs and they didn't. But Hizashi must run, he must search for his cubs because he is an alpha and he cannot bear the pain tearing at his heart for the agony of his Omega and the loss of his babies. When Shoyuta collapses, Hizashi and his husband can barely hold him and not collapse with his Omega because they needed to move. To run and run because their puppies were in the middle of the storm, with someone who could take them away forever, hurt them, or just. No, Hizashi wouldn't go in there, no, because those would kill them. Losing hope in finding them would tear them apart and Hizashi isn't confident enough to believe they could survive that. Hizashi had fervently kissed his Omega's forehead, even more heartbroken at letting go, but a glance at his alpha husband was only the reflection of equal thoughts. They had to run even if the air was escaping their lungs. Run and run, cover as much ground as possible while support arrived, because they couldn't wait, they couldn't waste time if they wanted a chance. So he ran without rest, watching each individual, searching and searching. He knew his alpha husband was running a stretch of his own. Hizashi ran and ran, even if the sound of sirens at his back told him that reinforcements had arrived, but it didn't matter because he kept covering more ground, desperation roaring in his gut and forcing him to push himself beyond the limits despite the cold of the rain, the devastating thunder of the storm and the mud making him dirty. He ran relentlessly in the midst of the storm even though there was almost no breath left in his lungs, searching for his cubs with great fear, longing and desperation. He never reached them. 45-year-old Ayama Hana moved frantically around the room. The cries of a couple kept her in anguish as she did her best to remove the wet garments. "Oh, little puppies, who would drag them out into such a storm?" the woman whispered sadly, working at exceptional speed because it was not an option for that pair to get any colder and risk getting sick. "Oh God, are things hard, dear babies?" The little ones just cried, breaking the kind woman's heart because she understood the purpose of leaving them at the gates of their place. After all, many children ended up here due to varied life circumstances, and it never got easier for Hannah, never easier. "That's it, little puppies." She tries to coo them, adjusting them in her arms for comfort, but the crying doesn't stop, and Hannah can understand. This pair is a bundle, and they cry for the lost. But they will be okay. Hannah will find them a place. She always does and always would. Oboro could not suppress the scream in his throat, turning away from the police officers and slamming a fist against the nearest wall. Raindrops were still dripping from his sky-blue hair, wetting the ground he was standing on in the middle of the reception area. It was very hard for the pro-hero Daylight to keep his thoughts together, not when his feelings were overflowing and there was no control because his pups are gone, they're gone and he wasn't there to protect them. Burrow. Hizashi's soft call is not enough to pull his bleeding fist away from the wall, because how much further away are his cubs now, who took them without alerting anyone? The cameras would show no movement or person. One moment, both pups were there and the next they weren't, as if a veil of invisibility had swallowed them, and isn't that bullshit? How could they find them if the person who took them had a quirk related to invisibility? Was it just one person or two or more? Who the hell was behind it? The three of them were liable to have people with resentment nipping at their heels. It came with the job of being heroes, but messing with their newborn pups? How twisted could that be? A familiar hand traced fingers on Oboro's wrist, a gentle, silent request that he remove his injured hand from the wall, and he relented, for there was no strength left in his body, the full weight of the loss crushing him like a building collapsing on him. "We lost them," Oboro whispers in a strangled voice, feeling the corners of his eyes fill with tears, for how could they do this? The pro-hero could feel it in his bones, his cubs were far out of reach. "We did it," Hizashi replies in such a low voice that for a moment he almost misses it. Oboro doesn't stop the wrenching sob that escapes through his lips, allowing himself to crawl into his husband's arms, burying his face in the blonde's neck. because he wanted so badly to disappear, wanted so badly to rip his heart out, because it hurt. It hurt so much. "Oh God, we have to go to show," he said in anguish as he tasted the salty tears that had slipped to his lips. "We didn't reach them, Zashi. We failed show. We failed our cubs." Hizashi tightens him embrace on Oboro, shaking uncontrollably because how can they continue to stand when this pain seems about to kill them? "We need to. Demand it. We need to do this," Hizashi says in too shaky a voice, and Oboro knows his husband is holding the shredded seams together for as long as possible, because they can't fall apart now, not when Shoyuta needs them right now. There's a heartbeat, then two, and at last they separate only to march in the direction of his husband Omega's room. And when they stand in front of the door, Oboro's hand hovers over the doorknob, heart pounding in his throat and unwilling to cooperate to show himself strong and support his husband's. A delicate kiss is placed against his temple, and he takes that hint of strength that Zashi conveys to him, so he opens the door. Shoyuta hasn't stopped staring out the window, as quiet and still as they had seen him last time. Oboro repressed a groan because Shuta's smell was very sour, loaded with pain and anguish that almost made him cry, and from the strangled groan beside him, he knows that Hizashi feels the same. "Hey, kitty," trying to trust him voice, Oboro speaks softly to his husband, approaching his bed, but not trespassing the space of his Omega. Hizashi approached quietly, taking place to Oboro's left. "They're not, are they?" Not a question on Shuta's part, Oboro is able to tell easily enough. The monotone and so devoid of life send chills down his spine and further damage his heart. "No, babe, they are not," Hizashi replies softly. Oboro watches him green-eyed husband, noticing how he trembles, and Oboro brings his hand closer, interlacing their index fingers together in silent support. Shoyuta slowly lowers his gaze to the lap where his hands rest and watches silently for a few moments. "I want to leave," he whispers, and a hint of emotion seeps through after a long time. There is bitterness mixed with pain. "Babe?" Hizashi tries to start to approach the bed, his voice full of concern. Shoyuta growls, ripping the sheets off his body and throwing his legs off the bed. Hizashi and Oboro immediately surround the bed. His blonde husband is the first to manage to catch Shoyuta before he falls to the floor, and Oboro steadies him on the other free side. The Omega writhes viciously, trying to wrench himself out of the grip. The bond between them finally lowers the barriers, and a wave of rage, sadness, and despair hits them. Shuta's emotions slide down the bond, raw, unable to let them breathe. There is a tension, a surge of worry and anguish through the same bond that belongs to the rest of their pack, who feels close. They are already very close. Shoyuta howls in desperation and anger, fighting with all his might to be released. There are no words, no more than Shuta's cries of protest and the helplessness of him alpha husbands, because there are no words to soothe the pain, there is no solution and no ultimatum to follow. This is raw, unadulterated pain because there are not her cubs in the safety of the pack. The door to the room opens abruptly. Oboro takes it upon himself to direct the gaze as he continues to wrestle with Shoyuta, who has not stopped fighting and trying to retaliate. Oboro's gaze meets Nemuri's, who is breathing erratically while there are tears in her eyes, her clothes soaked by the rain, and she trembles. The alpha lets out a strangled as her eyes go to Shoyuta, and she immediately approaches them, tearing the cloth on her arm and directing some of her quirk to Shuta's face, who in the end collapses against them as he falls into unconsciousness. Another sound comes from the door, and as he lets Zashi take Sho fully in his arms, he looks at the newly arrived Omega. Oboro just shakes his head at Tensei, who bites his lip hard and closes the door behind him in complete silence. And here, living on broken dreams, they stand in a deathly silence in the room. No one speaks, no one shows the intention to speak, because the pain of loss can be smelled in suffocating waves. Hannah smiled fondly at the pair of puppies she gently settled in the only crib available. After all, the rest were unfortunately very old and needed to be replaced, so the duo would end up in the only crib sharing it. Although the woman laughed fondly, as the two little ones seemed to not mind being glued to each other at all, making her coo at how cute they were. She sighed, checking the pair's body temperature one last time to let at least an hour pass to check them again. After all, Hannah wasn't going to take any chances and let a fever pass no matter how small it was. It was a Tuesday, is what the woman with forest green hair and eyes knows. It was midnight. She could barely breathe at the sight before her eyes. Because it wasn't possible, there was no way. Her gaze glued to her computer screen, she had been lying on the living room couch for a long, long time. Days? Everything is a blur before the searing pain, memories of screaming, crying and pleading that took him away. Taken away. A monster had taken him away, surrounded by dust that settled on the furniture, on the floor, accumulating next to the abandoned clothes scattered all over the place. Dishes and pots were unwashed in the sink, the kitchen untouched in a long time, the TV as a background noise and as the only lighting in the whole place, untouched rooms, let alone that room. It's a punishment to go in there, it will kill her to go in there. But it doesn't matter, it's not her priority, not when she's in there. When she's watching it right now. Her arm reaches out to the screen, her eyes fixed intently on the only individual she's interested in out of everyone in the group photo. Because isn't that him? It is. It is. That's him. They've changed his hair and his eyes, but it's him. She knows it's him. A smile trembles on her lips, her heart in her throat because it's him. They really just took him. Just away from her as punishment. Just hiding. That monster just made her think she had taken him away permanently. But there he is. Her baby, there he is. And she can get to him. Sure, it's a place far away, but she can get to him. She can. After a long time she stands up, because she must clean up. God, how will she receive her baby in this place that looks like a dump? She won't do that. She must arrange everything for her baby. Yes, she must do that and then go and rescue him. Hannah smiled warmly at the group of children surrounding her. They were shouting happily about the recent adoption of one of the puppies, excited about the fate of their siblings. Hannah was so proud of how good her children were. Toshi! The woman searched with her eyes for the little person that voice belonged to, finally looking at the little 3-year-old with ebony hair and lime green eyes bordering on yellow, going straight to his purple-haired, purple-eyed twin, who catches him in a hug only to fall rolling on the ground. Izuku, be nice to your brother, Hannah reminds him with amusement, stroking Annie's hair, the 2-year-old still clinging to her leg. Ni nani, hums the little boy non-committally with what little vocabulary he has learned. Hannah tends to be surprised by him and Hitoshi often as, gosh, that pair learns so fast, quick to talk, quick to sit, quick to crawl and then walk, quick to grow and learn. Hannah can only snort a fond laugh. Well, my children, soon Sakura will be here to take you to the park. Whose turn is it to go today? 5 excited eyes are shouted on the spot. Lisa, Nana, Izuku and Hitoshi, don't forget anything and don't cause trouble, okay? Always being good kids. He asks them with a kind smile. The 2 5-year-old girls and 2 3-year-old boys hum in agreement with dazzling smiles, making her feel that she has done something good with all these children along with the volunteers who support her in running the orphanage. Hannah can't help but look around every minute because it's already too late. Sakura should have arrived with the kids more than an hour ago, but there's no sign of them anywhere. Calls are useless when the line is busy or never answered. There is a sinking feeling in her stomach, and Hannah knows it. She knows perfectly well that something is wrong. Children, how about you help your Nana and go to your rooms and play? I will reward you later if you are good children. The little ones smile, accepting the indication and marching to their rooms. Hannah knows something will happen, and having 16 children in the common area will make things difficult. She goes back to the phone, looking for one more attempt to call when loud cries from outside paralyze her, causing her to open her eyes in shock and turn abruptly on her feet, almost running to the door to open it abruptly. There at the entrance, 2 police cars are parked while a uniformed man brings down his 2 girls, who are sobbing in anguish, but even though his heart is worried, he cannot concentrate on them. Not when Sakura has come down too, and in her arms Hitoshi cries so heartbreakingly, as if a limb had been broken or as if something had been torn off. Hannah's heart drops, because Hitoshi's cries and Izuku's absence is not good. Not good. Hannah is immediately in front of Sakura, who cries desperately while hugging the little boy in an attempt to comfort him. I'm sorry, it was just a moment, I only took his eyes just for a moment. said the 19-year-old desperately, clinging to Hitoshi. I lost him, Hana. I think someone took him. I don't know. Laments the young woman between sobs, and Hana for a second can't breathe because, when the children arrive at her orphanage, they are protected in it, they are groomed, fed, pampered and educated until a family adopts them. And the twins were a pair, a package that would not be given up for adoption separately, because she knows what is said about twin brothers, how there is a bond stronger than that of a soul mate, unbreakable, not easily severed, and where they would recognize each other from several meters away even if their appearance changed completely. Hana takes Hitoshi immediately, comforting the boy as best she can, all the while demanding all the information, all the while demanding the cops to get Izuku back. The search would continue and in the future would eventually cool down and end, for it seemed that Izuku had been swallowed by the earth. The woman with forest green hair and eyes was about to cry in despair. She didn't understand why her baby wouldn't stop crying. Why did she want to go back? She didn't understand. Her baby had cried all the way in the car, screaming and kicking, disobeying when she told him not to do that it was wrong, but her baby kept screaming and calling Toshi. Who was that? A friend? But he shouldn't cry like that. He's supposed to be with her already and he should be happy to go home. Why can't she convince him to calm down and be happy? She carries him back to her apartment, her baby still throwing tantrums, and how does she have so much breath in her lungs to keep from getting tired? The neighbors scream in annoyance at the crying and it only makes her more nervous, so she hurries and soon arrives home. Placing him on the couch almost resulted in an accident, because her baby had been trying to get her to let go. Her baby fell on the couch and crawled away from her, looking at her with teary eyes. The color is wrong. What did they do to his forest green eyes? What did they do to his forest green hair? Please, Izuku. She pleads desperately to him, tears already spilling from her eyes. Please be a good boy. Why are you making me sad? You're hurting me. Her little Izuku slows the crying down to soft sniffles, looking up at her with guilty eyes, and though she doesn't like to use that card, it was necessary. She moves closer to her baby, stroking her fingers over the soft baby cheek and how it hurts her when her child doesn't lean into her touch as usual. But it's okay. Once she gets the dirt out of his hair and his eyes are the same color as his mommy's, he's sure to return to familiarity. Yes, he had to go back to familiarity like that. The sound of the alarm clock only served to snap him out of his thoughts. Sleeping after his Thursday patrol didn't seem like an option at the time. He gets up slowly, his whole body creaking from the movements since he didn't do his usual stretches before going to bed, so now he resigns himself to the consequences of that action. He's in no hurry to leave the room. It's a day he and his husbands always take off, so there's not much to do. Without controlling it, his dark gaze slides to the date that marks the alarm clock, July 1st. 2XX is marked, and he cannot avoid the wave of bitterness and sadness that invades him, causing the corner of his lips to tighten in a straight line. To say that time usually helps to heal, learn, and let go is just a bullshit belief. That doesn't apply to situations like this. It's fine, perfect that time works for others and soothes the pain and even heals it, but for Sho Yuta, time passing is just a constant reminder of what he's lost and feels far from regaining. July 1st was the day he would love the most, and the one that would hurt him the most. Every day is a constant reminder of his failures and shortcomings, but specifically on this day everything becomes harder to bear. Remembering how the days turned into weeks, those weeks into months, and those months into years, only leave bitter traces imprinted on the tarnished remnants of his soul. Sho? Kitty? His lethargy ends as quickly as it had begun, and his eyes meet a familiar lime-green gaze. Hey, baby, do you want to come down and have breakfast with us, or will you do it later? There is no condescending tone or pity in the question, just an unspoken, delicate understanding like the caresses of a feather. I'll come down, he replies quietly and devoid of emotion, unprepared for this day. He never is, memories threatening to leave him in bed once again. Okay, Kitty, we'll wait for you downstairs. Hisashi doesn't enter the room and doesn't invade his space, for which Sho Yuta is grateful. He still doesn't want anyone to enter his personal space. He needs a moment, a breather to get him through the day. The blonde leaves quietly, leaving Sho Yuta once again in the solitude of the room, but now, with a short-term goal, He is able to finally move from the place where he had been standing still since he had gotten up. Hizashi returned to the dining room. With gentle grace he takes a seat next to Oboro, leaving the other side of the table free, because Shoyuda needs to initiate contact first and give permission for Oboro and Hizashi to enter his personal space, because Shoyuda needs to get some control in what he does in his life, keep everything in control because he wasn't in control that July 1st and it almost killed Shoyuda. "Hey, sunshine," Hizashi hums in response, not looking away from a dead spot on the table. Familiar fingers slide down and take her wrist gently, tracing caresses on the skin. "It's been 8 years, Hizashi whispers, his voice reflecting the pain and weariness that never go away, yet he usually hides beneath his present my hero attitude. "Yes, it's been quite a while," agrees his husband, who doesn't interrupt the massage he's providing for his wrist. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever find them," Oboro whispers with bitter pain, speaking his thoughts as if they were some kind of sin. "I'm afraid, Zashi, it's been so long and sometimes I think." The words die in Oboro's mouth, who has stopped messaging Hizashi's wrist and instead squeezes it tightly, all in an attempt to stay grounded. "Sometimes I think they're really just gone." Hizashi feels a huge lump in his throat. His eyes begin to pool tears as the emotions become suffocating with too much familiarity. "I don't want to give up, Burrow," is all he can say with a mouth heavy as lead. "I want to hope, my darling, because I want to believe. It doesn't matter if it takes more years, I want to believe we'll find them. Because if they don't hold out hope, they'll lose themselves, maybe they won't survive it, maybe it will destroy them. Or maybe it is closure that is needed and they are just clinging to tiny particles of sand. Maybe we should." Oboro's words stop once more in a strangled voice, and Hizashi knows why, because they are words that can whip up a storm, wreak havoc in areas that only have band-aids superimposed on them. "Maybe we should let them go." And despite having thought the same thing, Hizashi feels the hellish sting gnawing at his existence at the words, for perhaps it is true, years have passed and there was not a single clue, no sign that they are even alive and waiting to be found. Hizashi searches for what to answer, his lips half open and fixing his gaze on his husband's blue eyes, but any attempt dies when the sour smell of cedar and coffee hits her nose. They both gasp in horror, their gazes immediately darting to the entrance of the dining room where Shoyuda stands, watching them without actually seeing. Immediately the scent of wet earth and laurel sours rather quickly beside them. Oboro is immediately getting to his feet, but Hizashi doesn't have the courage to do that. His own smell of mint and bitter chocolate turns sour. Shoyuda finally seems to recognize them, and perhaps Hizashi wishes he didn't, because the look of betrayal he gives them is as hard as a dagger that is about to be plunged into his chest. Why? It's not a question, it's a clear demand from Shoyuda, who, contrary to all the instincts linked to the Omega confronts them, waves of silent rage hit them and send shivers down his alpha instinct. Listen. Oboro tries, his hands visible to the Omega in an attempt to show that he won't make any move Shoyuda doesn't want. Hizashi slowly and cautiously stands up, standing next to Oboro, because they must do this, they must face this whole situation. "I didn't mean it like that, let alone without having you in the conversation." Oboro's voice wobbles, and Hizashi slides his arm over and places his hand on his husband's lower back, tracing soothing patterns. "But for God's sake, it's been 8 years and what if maybe what we should do is just let it go?" He questions with all the pent-up pain recharged in his question. A searing silence follows. Shoyuda closes his eyes and clenches his jaw tightly, whereupon Hizashi immediately becomes concerned, because Shoyuda is struggling to be rational in this situation, to see the logic hidden in the reasoning that both Oboro and Hizashi have put forward. "They are alive," Shoyuda finally says, the words coming out slow and hissing, full of resentment. "If they weren't, I know I would know." Hizashi bites his lip hard, regretting opening his mouth in the first place when his husband Omega gives them a menacing look. "I would know." Shoyuda growls, almost baring his teeth. "You guys may be alphas, but you have no idea." "No idea." Oboro shudders beside him and Hizashi himself does. "What do you mean?" The question wasn't meant to be so blunt on Hizashi's part, but the bitterness those words caused him shook his alpha instinct. What about Shoyuta? Shoyuta doesn't back down. They're my puppies, several months they were in me, and you think I wouldn't know if they were dead? The hairs on the back of Hizashi's neck stand up, clenching his jaw tightly. It's not just your pups, Oboro says, suppressing how hurt he can be sensed to be through their scent and how the pack's bond is strained in an attempt to not let the emotions they feel run through him. We too have suffered through his disappearance, we too have struggled to hold on to hope. And yet they are posing a bullshit solution. Sizia Shoyuta. Turn the page, is that it, forget about it? And what, take the old normal that was 9 years ago. There's venom in Shuta's words, and Hizashi can barely control his emotions that are slowly starting to slide down the pack bond. No, for the hell of it no. You guys can give up if you want, even dead I won't give up. We're not giving up. That wasn't the point and you know it. Hizashi snarls, ignoring how Oboro tries to grab his arm, but the blonde pulls away abruptly, taking steps in the direction of the Omega, who looks ready to fight. You're not the only one who's suffered for the puppies. It's very different for us not to care than prioritizing you. What the hell do you mean? At that point, Shoyuta shouts, his eyes flaring crimson red as his hair gravitates. Hizashi, that's enough. Oboro shouts, reaching over and gripping Hizashi's arm tightly. At least Oboro is controlling his alpha instincts and his own pain, because he knows this will only cause a collision and someone must try to stop the disaster liking at their skin. No. I want to know. Shoyuta doesn't lose his bravery, even though Hizashi's scent only intensifies, unconsciously trying to mark a dominance. God, what if this tears them apart? Oboro holds his breath, only intensifying his grip on Hizashi, as it can't happen this way. They've been walking the edge for a long time now, scraps of pain clinging together in a desperate attempt. He understands Hizashi's feelings, they're the same feelings Oboro has, but to have it all turn out like this? They might not survive it, and Oboro doesn't trust them to move forward if they don't manage to fix what's about to explode, that could shatter Hizashi and Oboro's hearts, but with Shoyuta? Shoyuta would die. Omega almost died those first few months. Long time on the verge of death due to his depression, curled up in a nest that was supposed to have been inhabited by 2 little creatures. Do you think we don't feel guilty? Do you think for a second that we haven't gone over the mistakes made that night over and over again in our heads? Hizashi breathes erratically, his voice threatening to rise even higher, the risk of the blonde's quirk activation tickling their skin in anticipation. Losing our puppies the same day they were born almost killed me. And you, Shoyuta dash. Hizashi chokes on his words, tears spilling from lime-green eyes filled with bitterness and pain. You were letting yourself die. And I know that once you came out of your depression you clung on tooth and nail, all to look for them. But that tore us apart. So we gave priority to your pain. We gave priority to you because losing you will end up killing us completely. Oboro growls in warning to Hizashi, as he has noticed the change in Shuta's breathing and he doesn't like it. The Omega's scent changed to one filled with guilt, anger and resentment, and they need to talk about this, not shout it out in a fit of frustration. Hizashi doesn't get the memo. I don't want to give up on our puppies. Hell no. But it hurts too much to cling to a hope that shows no desire to provide any clue about them. Do you think it doesn't kill me to think that maybe we should let them go? The question is lost between tarnished edges of weariness and pain. Lime-green eyes stare shattered into black eyes. Oboro lets go of the tears he has fought so hard to hold back. Because Hizashi's words are true, they highlight the thoughts of both alphas clinging to the edge of the cliff. Shuta's expression changes completely to a more exhausted and saddened one. The Omega's shoulders slump after having been tense since the beginning of the discussion. There is a silence that suffocates them all for a long time as the uncontrolled smells reduce in intensity and the emotions of the others lock in their pack bond. Tensei and Nemuri convey their concern through the bond, but can't pay attention to it at the time. Shoyuta closes his eyes and without saying anything, turns to disappear into the hallway, heading for a door that is rarely opened and enters the room, only to lock himself in. Oboro tries to process what happened when he abruptly loses his grip on Hizashi, leading him to turn at once to see in time as his husband collapses to his knees on the floor, pressing his palms to his eyes hard. He gives Hizashi his space and Oboro gives himself one of his own, because this is a complete mess and he just wants to drown himself in a goddamn bottle of liquor. He pulls away, walking to the abandoned table and to collapse into a chair, only to cross his arms over the table and drop his head between them, laying his forehead on the cold wood. Shoyuta ends up leaning his back against the door, his haunted gaze glancing around the room, his eyes automatically darting to the nest in the left corner, a nest his puppies never made it to. The room was still intact, left the same way it was supposed to be to receive the newborns. The cribs were there, the stuffed animals and countertops with unused clothes, all stopped in time. A strangled crawls up his throat and Shoyuta begins to shed tears he shouldn't be able to produce from his dry eyes. Soon he drags his feet, arriving at the nest, an empty nest, years and years empty, where he enters it, doing his best to curl into a ball. Sobs begin to spill from his lips, and Shoyuta hates it. Why can't he at least cry silently? The ugly bitterness swallows him up. The argument that just happened shows its ugly teeth and bites him until he bleeds. And they were right, he couldn't see that through his pain, but also, they were wrong. They couldn't give up on looking because their instinct was screaming at them. He knew his puppies were alive. Maybe it wasn't the way to express it, but it almost killed him when Oboro had said that maybe they should let them go. Shoyuta simply turns his head away, burying his face in the garments with the familiar sense of his pack, and lets himself be dragged into tears. Hizashi knows he could have handled it differently. He's aware of it as he sinks into the couch and stares at a dead spot in the corner of the TV. Princess, them calico cat, lies in his lap, so he ends up petting her behind the ears with that. At least this way, Hizashi stays grounded while his head is racked with what he said. It will happen sooner or later, Zashi, Oboro tells him softly, taking a seat to his left, having given space between them over an hour ago. That doesn't absolve the guilt, Burrow, he whispers wearily, dropping his head on Oboro's shoulder. It doesn't, but I don't want what happened to tear us apart until we don't survive. Hizashi bites his lip hard, rubbing his nose on his husband's shoulder at the ragged tone of his voice. Me neither, love, Hizashi agrees. I need to go see him. God, this wasn't supposed to happen, not like this. He expresses bitterly. Oboro turns his head at an angle that is sure to be painful, and deposits a kiss on Hizashi's forehead. I'll start the meal, the two of us didn't even finish and Sho didn't eat anything. Hizashi hums, turning away from his husband and taking the opportunity he is being given. Hizashi gets up and heads to the nursery, standing in front of the door. His fingers caress the wood, making his way to the gap where there was supposed to be a sign with a couple of names on it. Once again he swallows back tears and gives a few consecutive soft taps on the surface, being able to get permission to enter. A long silence settles in for a few torturous seconds. Come in. Permission comes from the other side, and Hizashi takes a breath of air, opening the door to enter. Shoyuta is in the nest, curled up while his face is buried in a purple jacket, Namuri, his left hand clutching a white cat stuffed toy, Tensei, and with his right he clutches Oboro's and Hizashi's shirts to his chest. Hey, he calls softly, squatting down in front of the nest, but not stepping in to invade it. Shoyuta looks out of the corner of his eye, for a moment savoring the silence that is not suffocating as one would expect. The Omega turns his face away from where it is hidden, turning to look at him some more. Can you come in please? He asks in a shaky voice, causing Hizashi to almost start crying again. Gently he enters the nest, catching Shoyuta in his arms, letting his Omega's back press against his chest as they spoon. And finally Shoyuta speaks. He talks and talks, his feelings, his thoughts and reasoning. He says what upset him, apologizes for not considering Oboro and Hizashi's pain. Oboro soon joins in when Hizashi calls him, because this is a conversation between the three of them. Soon clinging in the nest, and continuing to talk about what's important, because all three are very clear that they want to survive this, they want to keep holding on to hope no matter if years go by, they want their marriage to keep going, they want to trust Shuta's fierce instinct that tells him the cubs are alive, waiting to come back to them. So they cling tighter, they cling to survive, and if that leads them to take not only individual but also group therapy, then they will take whatever they can to keep standing. Ignoring popular belief, children can be very smart no matter how young they are, too young to be that smart. He knows he's smart, he's not a genius, but he watches, he listens, he learns. He always learns, and sometimes it's fun to be smart, sometimes it's not. So he knows something doesn't fit. Inko is. Inko in his thoughts is Inko, and out loud is mother, and he feels a little guilty when he thinks about it, because why can't he call her mom? He feels guilty, but never enough to change it. Maybe it's because Inko's smell doesn't soothe him, and isn't that bad? Why is he a bad boy and doesn't feel at home with Inko's smell? At least that's what the other kids say when they talk to each other about their parents' smell and how they feel at home. Kaken usually tells him that too, and when his friend asks him, he lies and says he feels the same way. Izuku is 7 years old, he will be 8 on July 15th, and he is a smart boy. Izuku likes to learn, he learned to read even before Kaken. So he always takes books and reads. Always Aunt Mitz gets him books, Inko doesn't. She always said she worries about him reading things that are not for children. Uncle Maisie one day asked him why he was sad, so Izuku told him that Inko didn't want to buy books he liked, so Uncle told Aunt, and since then they have an hour of books when his uncles take care of him while Inko works. Izuku is good at watching. He always watches the Hero World channel on TV and watches the fight broadcasts, and he likes to analyze them so much. He already has 3 notebooks full. Although he could have had more, but he always does his hero analyses when Inko finally goes to work, since she says she's worried about his mumbling. Inko says he shouldn't mumble like that it's bad and that no one in the family does that. He doesn't understand, is it so bad to mumble? Kaken has never told him to be annoying, sometimes he just stands quietly listening, maybe his face is wrinkled and he looks angry, but he has never yelled at him about it. Aunt Mitz always smiles when Izuku mumbles, saying it's cute how he talks so fast. Uncle Maisie says his brain is very smart and works at a great speed, so he's a great thinker, and as a great thinker, he mumbles to get his ideas flowing comfortably, though never at school, kids are rude. They once told him he's creepy, but then said no more about it when he opened his mouth to try to tell them they were being mean. They recoiled in fright, almost crying, asking him not to use his quirk on them. Kaken had yelled at them that they were idiots, and that they should be more scared of Kaken than Izuku, because Kaken would beat them up if they kept bothering Izuku. So Izuku analyzes hero fights when he's alone or away from Inko's ear. He observes things, writes them down and comes to a conclusion. He's also a good listener. Izuku always follows instructions and his teachers congratulate him on it. Sure, sometimes he gets distracted by something else, but he listens carefully and everything is done right. So yes, Izuku is smart because he observes, listens and never stops learning. He's smart, so he doesn't feel comfortable when he remembers the argument with Inko 2 days ago. Oi, Zuku, he blinks in a daze, immediately looking at Kaken who has stopped swinging on the swing and watches him with a furrowed brow. The old witch said we're leaving. Izuku squeals, jumping off the swing immediately. Kaken just lets out a TSK, and follows as Izuku runs to find Aunt Mitz, who would take him to the apartment. Never home, never feels like home. Izuku will be left alone for at least half an hour, but he's older now, so he's not afraid and knows how to take care of himself. Children are not stupid, adults can be fooled into believing they are, but children can be smart. And in his case, he is an intelligent child, he is not a great genius, but he observes, listens and learns, he always learns. He is observant. Knowing how to see is undoubtedly what ensures his safety, so he learned to observe from a young age. Observing would allow him to know when to slip into the shadows. Watching would help him anticipate when to step back to avoid a shove or a slap. Watching would give him the advantage of running away. Hitoshi is 8 years old, just turned July 1st, though never celebrated, he only knows his birthday out of pure charity. He is 8 years old and very smart. He knows how to listen. Knowing how to listen allows him to anticipate bad intentions, helps him to know who is approaching, if the steps are strong or light, if they are coming to hurt him or pass him by. He listens to conversations he shouldn't, always showing ignorance and little interest in his surroundings, even if it really hurts and is painful to hear. know and understand. Hitoshi learns and does it on his own because in that house, never at my home, he is not allowed to see more, listen more or learn more, let alone talk more. It has secret corners, hidden places and places where he gets lost until he must return to the routine, go back to that house before they come back and stay quietly in your room, which is more of an old storage room than anything else. Hitoshi is still a child, but he knows the world is not fair. Children are cruel, adults are untrustworthy, and on top of all that, there are broken fragments that tell him he once lost something and hasn't found it. He knows he was 4 years old when the Shinso adopted him, no doubt with false promises that they have never kept. He doesn't remember them, but Hitoshi is fully aware that those adults failed. Maybe everything was fine at that time, he has no idea. He only knows that at the age of 5 his quirk had manifested and everything was a nightmare. Hitoshi loves heroes, he has always loved them and could spend hours watching them in action. Before his quirk, he knows that the only firm memory he has is of him swearing to be a hero who helps everyone. So when they said his quirk was villain, something soured in Hitoshi. How could his classmates call him a villain when accidentally his quirk was activated? Everyone had accidents with their quirks, so what made Hitoshi different? He had stopped having friends, his teachers kept their distance and caution, as if catching them with his quirk by accident was a crime to be afraid of. The kids were not physical, but did not hesitate to laugh, saying that he would not be a hero, that his quirk was only that of a villain. But Hitoshi would never be a villain. He is smart, he is good, he is capable. His adoptive parents kept their distance at first under layers of coldness, but soon any attempt to talk on Hitoshi's part was cut off with slaps and screams. The room that was once his was no longer his, evicting him to put him in the smaller room. Living within the walls drove him to silence, and he became smarter at surviving. Hitoshi is smart and knows that his life is not good, that he could have something better, but also, who could defend a child with a quirk who is considered a villain? Those days when Hitoshi stops to think about it make him bitter, because he wishes he had a family to love him. He longs for warm hugs and cooing sweet dreams. But Hitoshi knows that the world is cruel and that he will have to fight to show everyone that his quirk is not that of a villain, and when the day comes, Hitoshi is going to rub it in their faces. Isn't Hitoshi too young to be smart in order to survive? Izuku sits at his desk, looking at the various pamphlets scattered about while a notebook rests in his lap. I want to be a hero, he had happily told Inko after coming home from class and talking about it. Inko had a blank expression for a second, only for her gaze to turn a bit dark and pitiful. Baby, you can't be a hero, that's dangerous. Inko had said from her spot on the couch. Izuku had felt bitter about that right away, sitting up firmer from the couch where he had been sitting that day. Everything is dangerous, he had whispered in annoyance, and he wasn't just talking about the profession, because Izuku watches, listens and learns. Izuku is smart. Inko was always on him, always controlling what he would do, who he could be with and who he couldn't be with, deciding for him what he likes and what he hates, almost as if he was being made to be someone else. It all makes Izuku angry, and he feels guilty for feeling angry. After all, she is his mother, and if she does it's because it's for his good, right? Honey, it's dangerous, PRD. You know you could study something for a lawyer? Or how about computer science? Maybe a veterinarian? They're all noble careers. Inko had said it with that tone that Izuku hated, no matter that it was a tone full of sweetness and honey. She felt bad, she still didn't know what word fit, but she would know when she was older. For that moment, Izuku knew she hated that tone. No. I want to be a hero. And I like my quirk. My quirk would help me make it less dangerous. When Inko's expression changed at the mention of his quirk, Izuku knew she had ruined it, as Inko also hated his quirk because that's not your quirk. Inko had growled, sending a shiver down Izuku's spine, but he didn't feel like backing down at that moment. It's mine, he shouted angrily. Maybe not your quirk. Maybe not father's. But it's mine. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku finally fell silent, because Inko's voice and look didn't promise good things if he didn't keep quiet. You won't be a hero because that's risking your life. That's not your quirk because it's unlike anything seen in the family, so remember the rule that says, don't use a quirk that doesn't belong to me. That's the end of the discussion, so go to your room and reflect on what you've done. Izuku had lost, and that evening he went to his room. Since then he barely speaks to Inko, eats in silence, doesn't even look up to acknowledge her, because it's not fair, it's not right, and he's still planning what to do. He goes back to checking his notebook, reading the writing only to turn his gaze to the pamphlets on his desk, all following a specific arrangement for his goal. For Izuku will be a hero, and he must begin preparing in the shadows to have a chance to be one. Izuku is young, but he recognizes that the world is not fair. He has no friends other than Kaken because the children are afraid of him because of his quirk. The adults give fake smiles when they promise to correct the children so they won't be mean to Izuku when they feel brave and push him around or tease him that he would be a villain. Inko never lets him breathe. She's supposed to be his mother and he should feel safe with her, but she ignores his likes and dislikes. She completely denied that he had been introduced as Omega, because Inko and Hisashi were betas, it didn't fit, and said he should ignore the instincts that came with that. Inko hated Izuku's quirk, saying it wasn't family and she'd rather him be quirkless than have a quirk that wasn't his. Inko was a strange mother. Yes, he knows the world isn't fair, so he watches, listens and learns quickly in order to survive. Isn't Izuku too young to be smart and get out of situations he doesn't like on his own? It was not Izuku's intention to find. Izuku is curious, he always takes care to satiate his curiosity when a topic catches his attention. He researches until he finds the column of answers. He fills his desk with notes and books next to the computer that at the end has several tabs open, and on his cell phone he listens to Put Your Hands Up radio with headphones. It's always great to listen to Present Mike. After all, he talks about the things that the heroes of the day won't say: quirk discrimination, labor exploitation, discrimination in schools, defends the rights of quirkless people. He even has a children's section to explain alpha, beta and omega dynamics to kids. Present Mix program is one he has never missed since he discovered it when he was 9 years old. When Izuku investigates, he dives into his own bubble, and usually does a little dance to celebrate when he gets to the answers. He doesn't back down from a challenge. Growing up with Kaken and the Bakugu would eventually teach him that he must bare his teeth and keep going until he wins. And yes, sometimes, Izuku finds curiosities that were not planned, but he accepts the challenge and has fun with it. But now he hadn't intended to find anything. The day would be busy, like every day since he was 8, so he didn't have time to discover something and pick it apart until he found answers. Not at that time at least. He always investigates in the evenings, when the day is almost over and Inko's presence has disappeared into the confines of the adult's room. He wasn't looking for him, but in the end found him. September. Izuku's routine belongs to Tuesday. On Tuesdays he attends Aldera from 7 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Once his school hours are over, he eats lunch on his way to the dojo he has been enrolled in since he was 7 years old. When he was 7, Izuku would hold on to his dream of being a hero, so instead of talking about it, he would do everything indirectly to prepare himself. He told Inko that taking apprenticeship courses would be fun, plus he would be safe in his courses while she worked the extra hours she wanted to take to generate more income to support them. But Izuku was never upfront with the courses he said he would take. Izuku says he would take a drawing course? Replace that with a martial arts course. A cooking course? A gymnastics course? A crafts course? Parkour course? The only courses he's ever been genuine with were the computer course and the dance course. He's good at drawing and the tutorials on the internet are good, so he can keep that alibi. Learning to cook he's done with the Bakugu every Sunday he has nothing to do, and the crafts, well, he's never asked for evidence, so he's never had to prove anything. Today he had no classes at Aldera, something about a general meeting that he wasn't the least bit interested in knowing why it was happening, and so his Tuesday schedule changed completely. His school schedule had served him to wake up a little later. He made a balanced breakfast. Inko had left some, but Izuku didn't want to eat fried eggs today, so maybe he would give them to the puppies in the alley on the way to the dojo. Once he had finished breakfast, he would take care of some cleaning up, only to finally decide that he could get a head start on the advanced English courses he was taking online. Everything went upside down in that instant. Izuku had had a problem. His computer apparently had not wanted to turn on, and after checking he would discover that the connection was not working, so he needed a new one. He can ask a friend, whom he met in the mixed course of computer and mechanical and technological support, for help. She is a genius and always has diverse materials. He could surely ask her for the favor. He wasn't worried he had options, but he didn't want to change his mission, so he went to Inko's room to get the laptop. Inko told him he could use it for his homework if he needed it, and only for that. An act of trust, she said. Everything was normal until it was not. Inko had left the laptop on. She never left appliances on or plugged into the power when they weren't being used. She was an energy saver, so it was strange for him that sight. Izuku had decided he just needed to close whatever was open on the screen and do his thing, but his plan didn't even kick off when his eyes stopped on a saved post on Inko's social network, a social network he doesn't use much due to being busy. It was an old post. Izuku could tell by the band-aid marking your saved memories. No, the tag hadn't caught his attention. What caught his interest was the post, a group photo of a bunch of random kids, with some adults. A group photo of an orphanage, he notices, all smiling while there are names tagged on each child. Stomach sinking, he holds his breath as his eyes wander until they land on two children in particular, sitting at the front of everyone, laughing as they hug. He reads the name tags and for a moment, everything stops. Hitoshi and Izuku. An inexplicable bitterness sours his smell. Izuku grimaces and groans in anguish helplessly. Because that boy, Izuku, that boy has ebony hair and lime green eyes that are almost yellow, and Izuku himself is like that. The few times he has gotten away with avoiding forest green dye, he has admired his curly ebony hair, which sometimes gravitates freely as if it were a cloud and had nocturnal constellations. When resting from contact lenses, he marvels at the lime green hue of her eyes, which often glow sea blue when he carries out the activation requirements of his quirk. Izuku covers his mouth with his hand to keep from gasping, because he remembers reading the birth certificate of Izuku Midoriya when he and Inko were cleaning out the wastebasket of important documents. Clearly on the record they marked the hair and eyes forest green. And Inko always repeated over and over again that his hair was the right shade, that it just got dirty when he was little. Sure, that excuse worked, but Izuku is smart and realized right away that his hair has been originally ebony colored. He bites his lip hard, paying attention to the date, and gasps again when he marks himself 9 years old, 3 years old, that Izuku is 3 years old, and he knows it because Inko has pictures of him at that time and, God, he looks the same. She also notices that in the photos where he is 3 years old, Izuku looks sadder, reluctant to smile, and that just raises doubts about the events of his life. Izuku loves puzzles, but this particular day he hates them. There are pieces of the puzzle lying around and bent, some don't fit, and he can't find the ones that do either. So Izuku gets brave and heads to the collection of saved memories. Certainly one of the cool things about that social network is that it allows you to save posts and remind you of their dates by appearing on the day they reach a certain age of having been saved. An advantage is also that you can title them, giving them tags or notes to highlight their importance. Izuku knows it's wrong, that he should feel guilty for invading Inko's privacy, but he needs to at least find more pieces of the puzzle, because he doesn't understand and hates not understanding. Izuku curses, his eyes wide open wide, and he reads 2, 3, 4 times the only 2 words recorded in the publication's save. He shudders, for this alone shows many possibilities, but very few true answers. Hands shaking, he pulls out his cell phone, opening the camera and ignoring the series of messages that had apparently been entering his inbox. Izuku takes it upon himself to take 3 pictures of the post to be sure, only to quickly move on, returning the page to how he had found it. Everything is left as it had been. He doesn't even want Inko to suspect he tried to use the laptop. As if the place was suffocating him, Izuku left the room immediately, closing the door almost with a slam. The trembling of his body makes it difficult for him to make his way to the couch, but he finally manages to collapse on it. He breathes once, twice, 3 times. He stares at the ceiling for a long time, trying to make the overwhelming oppressive feeling in his chest fade away. The cell phone vibrates in his hand and he wearily goes through it finally, noticing 3 chats to be attended to. For a moment he thinks he could leave them for now, but maybe what he needs is a breather, so he opens the first chat. Chat, who has 2 left feet? 2 participants. The best alien queen, Do you think Ida-san would be mad at me if I decide that I want to change my partner for the session? Read, today 8:30 a.m. Guess who I want as a new partner? Sent at 9 a.m. Hey, is everything okay, Mito? You're usually awake, even if you don't have school, which is a sin. What kind of crazy person likes waking up early on a day with no school? Just you face with tears of joy. Posted at 9:30 a.m. The best broccoli, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Will you choose Takata-kun? Although I don't know whether Ida-sensei will let you change your partner. I think last time she said she wouldn't let you do it again. The best alien queen. Mito, my dear broccoli friend. You're alive. Were you sleeping? You usually answer at a super fast pace when you don't have courses or classes. The best broccoli, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Sorry. I was busy, I think. I had my cell phone on silent. Plus I was doing some cleaning. You know, before I went to the dojo I wanted to waste time somehow. The best alien queen. I understand, broccoli. Never mind. By the way, no. It's not with Takata. Smiley face. The best broccoli, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. So, the best alien queen / oh, Omega. Hello, Midoriya Izuku, you have been selected by the goddess of dance to be my partner. Smiling face with horns, smiling face with horns, smiling face with horns, smiling face with horns. The best broccoli, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. Oh no. No. Last time we almost sent Nanasuke to the doctor because we both worked on an impossible choreography. The best alien queen. So what? I'm Alpha. The best broccoli, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. You have no sense of control and I have no sense of self-preservation. So obviously it's a horrible idea for us to go back to teaming up again. The best alien queen. Well, I didn't see you very against doing that choreography, what don't you? You even gave several tips for adding mind-blowing moves. I'm Alpha. The best broccoli, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. And you still don't get my point? The best alien queen / oh, nope. I'll see you at Saturday's session. Dancing couple. Smiling face with horns. The best broccoli, greater than over equal to less than over equal to. I hate you. The best alien queen / oh, I love you too, kissing face with closed eyes. I have classes. I will send you messages at night, sparkles. Izuku snorts with amusement, trying to understand why he chooses to befriend the most chaotic people. Though a part of him, he's thankful with the small amount of friends he has. They never saw his quirk as something to be afraid of and were never ignorant on how it worked or he could use it. His alpha friend can sometimes be a lot. She's like a hyperactive shooting star, but she was what he needed to calm his disastrous thoughts. He slides his attention to another chat, letting out a laugh at the first message because of course. Chat. If it didn't fail once, it's no good. 2 participants. The pink gremlin. I finished it. We weren't supposed to. We weren't supposed to test it until Friday. But I couldn't help myself and tried it. Even though now I think my parents are trying to kick me out of my house for my 234th explosion. Details. Straight face. The green helper. That's why you should have tried it. When we went to the course. This Friday and you tried it. Without me? Wow, the betrayal. The pink gremlin. Oh, sorry. I know how much you love the explosions when we test the teams, but don't worry. We'll be able to make more of our babies explode this Friday because you'll take an extra hour from the usual schedule, right? The green helper. I'll do it. I'm learning to hack local cameras with Takita-san and that covers all my course hours. Deny the illegality of learning that. It's just for learning purposes. So I'll take that extra hour and we can work together. The pink gremlin. As long as learning is in the name of science, what does legality matter? The green helper. I think you have put it incorrectly, Hatsi. Do I remind you that once Keat-san said that with what she was learning in computer science, she could destroy an entire system? I mean, I wouldn't do it, but you get the point. The pink gremlin. And my point, I know you wouldn't. You would bush head. Bush. But maybe someday you'll need that knowledge. Less than legal knowledge to save someone, so let's look at the pros. The pros then the cons. I may have burned a dress that I left hanging on the chair. The green helper. Please don't burn your house down. The pink gremlin. You know I don't make promises. Bush head. I'll talk to you later. Izuku sinks into the cushions, giggling a little as she closes the chat with his Omega friend. She takes a quick glance at the chat with Kaken, noticing him talking to him about Aunt Mitsuki wanting them for dinner that night. And that reminds Izuku that he needs to start putting together a new puzzle, but for today, maybe it's better to put it off a little longer. He opens the gallery, selecting the photo and looks at the image once more, his eyes now focused on Hitoshi, and Izuku wonders why there is a sinking sadness in his stomach as he looks at the boy. Hitoshi cursed inwardly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to escape from his eyes. He ran as fast as he could while listening to the screams behind him along with the quick steps, following him without leaving him alone. Hadn't Hitoshi had enough? He runs along the path he knows and is normal for him to take from the school to the house where he is staying. His jaw hurts and the object is hurting his lower face. Of course they would. They had been late. Of course they would treat him less than human. The few people on the road just turned away, perhaps looking concerned, but more concerned about getting involved, and isn't that bullshit? He quickened his pace more. Maybe it won't do any good to get to the house. After all, there's no one there, and if there was, he doubts very much they'd help him. In any case, they'd keep the DMN object to start using it on him. At least when they get to the house, they won't be able to enter because it's private property and they would be breaking some laws. Or maybe that doesn't scare them and they think the authorities could give a DMN about a kid with a villain quirk. He had that in mind, but of course the universe hates him and that idiot's, Higurashi, quirk, which is a loop flowing from his wrist, binds him from his chest and imprisons his arms. Hitoshi lets out a gasp as he is yanked backwards and falls but first to the ground, and the idiot Beta laughs, dragging him with the help of his alpha partner, Nagase, into the alleyway they weren't even 10 feet away from. Hitoshi squirms and growls, cursing because he wishes his pheromones were already strengthened at this point, because he's only an alpha who still can't do that and assert himself and put up a fight. Stupid nature that strengthens his presence until he's 15 to 16. Oh no, Shinso, don't you dare try to escape, you demon villain. Nagase gives him a toothy grin, full of mockery. Who the F is the villain? Please don't look at us like that. And Omega hums with stupid condescending sneer, looking at him pityingly. You must understand that it's the right thing for you to use that. After all, we can't let a villain threaten to control the minds of Nabu's students. Have you seen how they are afraid of you? Higurashi questions with mock sadness. You scare them, Shinso, so we must make them feel safe. A smile creeps across the Beta's lips, feigned sympathy reflected in the sickly smile. A villain who lies saying he'll be a hero. That's horrible, Shinso. Hitoshi is so fed up with this, he can't help the tears that peek out of his eyes until they finally spill over, so he helplessly ducks his head as best he can, because the demon muzzle restricts him so much, and chokes him, so much that he can hardly breathe, and it's worse because of the noose wrapped around his chest, leaving him imprisoned. Those idiots keep talking, but Hitoshi is more focused on trying not to choke, because he's short of air. He can't breathe. He can't breathe. Will he die like this? He feels like he's about to. His thoughts come to an abrupt halt when a new smell enters the scene. The smell of damp earth combined with jasmine gives him an inexplicable reassurance. Why is that smell familiar? It's a sour scent, clearly angry, but not to Hitoshi, not directed at him. And Hitoshi doesn't know why he knows that. Let him go. The new person growls, and Hitoshi finally opens his eyes as he tunes into his surroundings better, looking towards the entrance of the alley, where a boy in a black uniform approaches them. Forest green eyes look furious, but not directed at Hitoshi, and even seem to glow a bit, and Hitoshi notices how the forest green hair seems to bristle a bit in gravity, how Hitoshi's hair always does and what he has never given him an answer to. Oh man, you mustn't misunderstand us, we're doing a greater good here. Nagase says with a toothy grin, stomping forward as if to mark a dominance. Hitoshi watches the boy, who is now perhaps only 5 feet in front of them. The stranger frowns and clenches his jaw tightly. Oh yeah, I don't get it. I mean, wow, I didn't know that gagging someone, tying them up and bullying them was doing a greater good, considering that's a 12-year-old boy. Says the boy with a smile and feigned glee, even giving a little enthusiastic hop on the tips of his toes. Listen, kid, Aldra, right? Higurashi questions, looking at the green-haired boy with narrowed eyes. That's right. Midoriya, 12 years old and Omega. Nice to meet you, reports the boy with unabashed happiness, but there are sharp edges to the Omega boy's sunbeam attitude. Well, Midoriya, you know? This guy right here. Matu kicks Hitoshi's side as he speaks, causing him to let out a choked hiss in pain. He feels the scent of the Omega, Midoriya, sour further as if that's possible. This kid here is our classmate, and he has a villain quirk. For crying out loud, you should see our class. We're all so terrified of him. The idiot feigns a scared tone, and Hitoshi is scared, because what if that kid hears them? What if he shares those thoughts? Then it would be painful, and he doesn't understand why. Hitoshi doesn't know that boy at all, but something about the boy brings familiarity and a sense of being home that is associated with erased memories. He's capable of brainwashing if he talks to you. Don't you find that scary? Hitoshi's stomach sinks lower, and in anguish he always knew how to control tears at his chest, looking at the boy with forest green eyes who begins to wipe the feigned smile off his face. Are there good and bad quirks, then, of villains and heroes? Midoriya questions with too much seriousness and a hint of irritability. Wow, and what you guys are doing, how is it classified? Because it's not. Nagase growls, stomping his foot hard towards Midoriya, who doesn't even tremble. Why don't you back off, Omega? Stop meddling if you don't understand the issue here. There's a threat in the tone, and Hitoshi growls in warning because, if they think he's going to stand still when they threaten the one person who seems to defend him, and who is familiar, so familiar that it feels like, at home, not completely, there's still something missing, but this familiarity is more than enough. Midoriya glances at Hitoshi, and he once again gasps because the Omega's expression is soft, full of soothing edges, only to turn hardened back to Nagase. Again, villain's quirk? Who are you to decide? A dangerous smile spreads across Midoriya's lips, teeth beginning to show, and Hitoshi is reminded of that cat's smile from a pre-quirk-era movie, Cheshire, a Cheshire smile. Well, if they think their quirk is villainous so much, then mine is too. He says relatively calmly, shrugging his shoulders with disinterest. At least my classmates aren't inhuman enough to try to muzzle me. The rope on Hitoshi's torso tightness, and he can feel the uncertainty of the 3 idiots who have been bothering him for a long time now, but Hitoshi is only focused on Midoriya, villain quirk? Does he understand? You piece of sheet, Nagase hisses, trying to throw himself at Midoriya. The Omega boy suddenly opens his mouth, and as he exhales, a huge cloud of blue and lilac colors expands towards them, covering the 4 of them. The cloud of sky blue hues makes it hard to see, but not hard enough, so he manages to still have Midoriya in his range of vision, and then he has noticed with amazement as the Omega's eyes light up a strong green and his hair gravitates entirely, only to have the effect fade away as he blinks. Midoriya jumps back as Matu emerges from the cloud abruptly with an open palm in his direction, and Hitoshi gasps silently because he knows that action came with the activation of the idiot's fire quirk. The cloud dissipates, and Hitoshi hadn't noticed the release of his torso and arms until he moved a little. His eyes open so wide that Hitoshi is in pain and turns his head to look at Higurashi, who is staring at his hands in horror and fear. What did you do? Nagase whispers, looking shocked and fixed on Midoriya. Hitoshi turns his gaze back to the green boy, noticing how he bends down a bit and picks up a wooden stick tied around his waist. He never noticed it was there, and Hitoshi scolds himself because he forgot to watch all the angles carefully. I could say, I've erased your quirk. Izuku replies casually, playing with the wooden stick in his hands. Now, do you want to leave, Or should I put my mixed martial arts skills to practice? Omega, roars Nagase, his pride clearly hurt and almost lunging at Midoriya, only being held back by the other two idiots. No, stupid, we're leaving, shouts the beta of the trio at him, pulling the furious alpha with the help of the Omega. Midoriya silently moves out of the immediate way, always keeping an eye on them until they have left the alley until he can no longer smell their foul odors. The sound of the wood hitting the ground brings Hitoshi out of his lethargy, leading him to look at Midoriya again, who closes his eyes only to let out an anguished collapsing to the ground on his knees. Ding, growing up with Kakin and Min helped at all. The Omega whispered with clear relief, but also exhaustion. Forest green eyes turned to Hitoshi in full this time. I hate quirkist idiots. And then there's a soft smile on the boy. Hey, Hitoshi, will you let me take that thing off you? I promise to be careful and that I won't hurt you. Hitoshi flinches a little in surprise, as he didn't expect this stranger to know his name, let alone speak to him with such familiarity. But Hitoshi feels no distrust. There is a huge vow of faith in this Midoriya boy, so, nervously, he nods in agreement. The Omega smiles more confidently at him, carefully approaching Hitoshi until he reaches his back. Listen, I'm about to unbuckle this thing. I don't want you to hurt yourself anymore, so try not to move, okay? Hitoshi gives the briefest of nods, only to then stand very still as he feels Midoriya's hands reach for the strap. By the way, I owe you a lot of apologies. The boy whispers, and Hitoshi can't help but frown in confusion. Well, I didn't catch you in time. If I had arrived at Nabu a few moments earlier, I might have intervened sooner, but you were already gone when I got there and I had to follow your smell of latte and lavender. Clarifies Midoriya as if he had sensed her confusion, but the answer only gives Hitoshi more doubt. I'm sorry too, but your quirk will remain erased for at least 10 minutes. They were very close to you. Hitoshi shrugs a little with that last one. Well, he doesn't understand the former, but he does understand the latter and he won't judge Midoriya for that. The grip loosens and Hitoshi gasps as he breathes better again and manages to open his tense mouth as the muzzle drops with a thud against the ground. Then, Midoriya is once again on his knees in front of Hitoshi, a safe 3 feet away, which Hitoshi quite appreciates. It must hurt. Midoriya whispers in anguish, looking not at his eyes but at the area of his jaw, where he himself can feel the burning of the marks that are about to be red-hot in that area. Hitoshi lets out a shaky sigh and shrugs, not looking away from the forest green eyes. He opens up a little to try to speak, but grimaces because it hurts like hell. So he wrings his hands. He could use sign language, but what if that kid doesn't even know it? Hardly anyone is interested in learning it at Hitoshi's age, so why dash? Do you know how to sign? Midoriya asks him abruptly, pulling him out of his thoughts and making him focus his attention on him again, but the Omega has his eyes fixed on Hitoshi's still wringing hands. A little shaky from nerves, Hitoshi raises his arms and opens his hands. Throughout the process, Midoriya follows him with an attentive gaze. I do, he signs slowly, and sees a smile light up on Midoriya's face. I do the same. Midoriya signs back at the same time as he speaks. When I was 10 years old, a quirkless girl with selective mutism joined classes, so I set out to learn sign language to make things easier for her. We became friends and were soon able to talk to each other. Although she later had to leave Aldera because of the stupid discrimination. Midoriya shrugs his shoulders bitterly, losing the joy he had had at the beginning of the explanation. I decided to learn it because it's rare that I speak or am allowed to speak, so at least I could have something to communicate with, even though hardly anyone uses sign language. Hitoshi explains, not understanding why he is sincere in revealing the reason why he learned, but the smile that returned to Midoriya's face was worth it. Thank you for telling me that. Hitoshi. Midoriya slowly spells out the name, only to then smile shyly. Sorry, I'm calling you by your first name and I haven't even given you mine. Hi, I'm Izuku. I'm fine with you calling me by my first name only. The truth is that I'm not a fan of my last name right now. Hitoshi can't help but arch an eyebrow at the comment, but he won't argue because it's not his place to question. Now, I know you have questions, but maybe it would be better to go somewhere better than here to talk? I know it's hard to trust someone you don't know, But I swear I wouldn't hurt you, not intentionally or with bad intentions. Hitoshi nods carefully because in pure honesty he doesn't lose anything. Besides, he trusts Izuku. He doesn't know why, it's just a familiarity that feels right. Great! He exclaims with genuine joy, a sunny smile gracing the Omega's face. We can head to a nearby park I saw earlier. The heaviest hour of the day is over, so it'll be mostly sparse with pedestrians. Izuku gets up from his spot and heads over to one of the trash cans, against which a yellow and a gray backpack are leaning there. Those idiots left your backpack at the entrance, so I left it with mine. Izuku explains to him, as if sensing his question, only to turn to look at him as Hitoshi is already standing approaching the red-haired man. Do you want to carry your bag or do you want help? He asks, and Hitoshi can't help the corner of his lip from rising a little, because Izuku is giving him a choice and is respecting him as an alpha at the same time. Hitoshi holds out his hand and Izuku gets the message for what it is and hands the backpack back to Hitoshi with a smile. Before Izuku turns around, he waves his hands to get the Omega's attention, who tilts his head to the side with noticeable curiosity. Then he sighs. What is our bond? He asks him too directly because he needs to know this. He wants the answer to the sense of familiarity he feels with Izuku, to the feeling of having finally found home. Izuku softens his smile. Apparently, we are twin brothers, Hitoshi. Shoyuta sighs, sinking into the nest he set up in his living room 2 days ago. There's a stressful distress that leaves him helpless, so I need to nest for comfort. Something tells him that this sinking in his stomach is not just on his part. He feels that somehow, it is his cubs that are very distressed these days, to the point that Shoyuta can feel them more clearly than at other times. Since they were born, Shoyuta inexplicably can feel his own anguish that haunts him, but he has also managed to feel in small measure waves of anguish and bad feelings that do not necessarily belong to him, but he knows they are theirs. He knows they belong to his puppies. So he takes a moment to follow his Omega instincts more on these occasions when he can feel his cubs. And despite the anguish of not being able to be there to comfort them, at least with this he knows they are still alive. Shoyuta takes a respite in comfort until those tribulations subside, but on this occasion, something has changed, as that anguish is disappearing in silent peace that disconcerts, but also reassures Shoyuta, because maybe her cubs are already better. Izuku took the initiative and sat on the bench near the pond in the park, watching with a bit of curiosity a mama duck with her ducklings swimming in the water. The Omega noticed out of the corner of his eye how Hitoshi sat next to him without establishing much distance between them, but respecting an invisible line at the same time. Since Izuku had answered Hitoshi's question at the entrance of the alley, there was a wordless agreement not to say anything about it, where Izuku took it upon himself to first initiate walking towards the park, and it was an unspoken agreement that Izuku would lead the way. Why did you keep that thing? Hitoshi breaks the silence, and Izuku can't hide the small shudder at the sudden break of silence. Izuku hums, turning his gaze to Hitoshi as he tilts his head to the side curiously. Izuku couldn't recognize what the question was about. The muzzle. Hitoshi clarifies as an afterthought, purple eyes traveling to Izuku's backpack resting next to his feet. Oh, sorry, I didn't understand. He admits with a small nervous laugh, not avoiding bringing his left hand to the back of his neck and rubbing it nervously. And about that, well, if you want to do something against them you have to keep the evidence, so there's at least a case. He answers the question, dropping his hands to his lap. But are you okay with talking? Does it hurt anymore? Because it doesn't bother me if you want to sign during the whole conversation. Hitoshi shakes his head. It doesn't hurt so much anymore, it's just annoying. But I can talk. Assures the alpha calmly. They both fall into a contemplative silence after that. Hitoshi closes his eyes for a moment and Izuku observes the marks on his twin's cheeks, if only he had been a little quicker. So, Izuku blinks, refocusing on Hitoshi's eyes that look at him expectantly. Do you want to tell me how you found me and why you say we're brothers? Although the words are direct and blunt on Hitoshi's part, Izuku senses no hostility, mockery, or distrust from them, only genuine curiosity disguised as indifference. Izuku snorts a tired laugh. Honestly, I don't know where to start. I mean, it wasn't even the plan to look for you today. Yeah, maybe I was thinking about it since I put half the puzzle together, but it was just an impulse to look for you all the way to your school after my school term ended. I'm even passing my gym class today. He's silent for a second, realizing he rambled as usual, and notices how Hitoshi seems interested in his murmurs, not annoyed, not saying it's weird or that he should focus and get straight to the point. Last-minute plan? Hitoshi asks him with a smile. There's a playful tone in his voice that brings Izuku to comfort, making him smile as well. Yes. I was really looking forward to meeting you. When I discovered those documents, it only encouraged me to search more. Why, it meant that I was right to feel that something was missing. Hitoshi arched an eyebrow in her direction, but the smile on the purple man's face never faded. Excuse me. I guess I should explain this. He laughs nervously again, only to close his eyes and take a breath of air. Well, I guess I can first tell you a little about my life and me, so you get to know me a little and we can understand together the puzzle I recently discovered. Hitoshi nods, settling better on the bench and keeping eye contact with him. First, I have clear memories from the age of 5. I've known my name was Izuku forever. He grimaces a little, reaching out with his right arm to grab a green curl and tug it a little. Midoriya Inko, a beta woman, always repeated when I was little that I was her son, so I was raised under that. Hitoshi frowned, clearly uneasy with those words. Inko always took care of me. She was a mother. She fed me, took care of me and everything she was supposed to do, but I could never see her as mom, you know? In my head it was always Inko and out loud it was mother. I never had an answer for that. I always felt guilty about it, but not enough to change it despite the many years I lived with her as her son. Ever since I was little, Inko would say that my hair color was dirty and that they had changed the color of my eyes. Izuku reaches down to his backpack, taking from the smaller bag a mirror, only to straighten up again and hold the mirror with one hand in front of his face, while with his free hand he poked at his left eye. She always insisted that wasn't the right thing to do, so for as long as I can remember, she dyed my ebony black hair to forest green. He removed the first contact lens, only to quickly move on to the second. And she forced me to wear forest green contacts. He whispers, lowering the mirror while on his left hand's index and middle fingers are the contacts. They're annoying, you know, but I didn't want Inko to be sad either, so I wore them. Izuku turned his gaze to Hitoshi, who looked at him in astonishment. You have a nice eye color. Hitoshi assures me with a small smile. Izuku snorts a laugh. I like my eye color, thank you. He mutters with warm cheeks. And well, when I was younger I believed her a little when she said my hair was dirty, and my eyes hadn't been the same, but as I got older, I just realized that she didn't accept my true appearance, and why would she do that? I always had more questions than answers. He sighs wearily. Another point in this is my quirk. Izuku pauses for a second, grimacing and lowering his gaze to the ground. This part will be one of his least favorite parts to tell. I manifested my quirk at the age of 5, and it wasn't good for Inko. She got hysterical? I activated it at some point when I spoke. Clouds suddenly burst from my lips and flooded the apartment. I was excited, but Inko shouted that that wasn't my quirk, that was wrong. Izuku shook his head, closing his eyes tightly to take a moment with himself. I got so scared that something else kicked in. My eyes burned as I held them open and Inko yelled at me to stop. When I blinked the feeling was gone, but my eyes were a little dry after that and it was annoying. After that, Inko came over to me and grabbed my arm, saying we should go to a specialist and fix me up. But then, Inko tried to lure with her weak telekinesis quirk the car keys into her hands. Nothing happened and she turned to me and demanded that I stop whatever I was doing. I clearly started to cry. After all, I was 5 years old and didn't understand Inko's reaction. She gave up, coming to the conclusion that I wouldn't get anywhere, so in the end we ended up with a specialist who only recommended that I go to a quirk counselor like the other kids to handle my quirk. Izuku couldn't help but sink further into his seat. A rule was made in the apartment, and I could never use my quirk. The only reason it's registered is because of my Aunt Mitsuki, who yelled at Inko when she found out from Kaken that Inko didn't want to take me to register it. I have used it only where Inko would not see. I have practiced with the help of Kaken, Min, and Hatsi to use it. Everything I know about my quirk is because I've been analyzing quirks since I was little, so I analyzed mine to exhaustion. There is a long silence from there. Izuku is grateful for the chance to settle his thoughts. Is there anything else inside that? Hitoshi asks very cautiously, and Izuku can't help but tense up because of course Hitoshi would think that. When she started the rule, I was not in the habit of obeying so. So Inko started with handkerchiefs, tied them in my mouth. She said over and over that she didn't want to do it, but that I was hurting her by using a quirk that wasn't hers or her husband Hisashi's. Izuku shook his head vigorously. It was enough time she applied that correction, that by the age of 7 I had learned that I shouldn't, at least, use my quirk while Inko was watching. He shook his head. We're getting sidetracked. He cuts that storyline off, not wanting to go deeply into it because it's long since been superseded. So, let's take those 2 points, my appearance and my quirk. These, which didn't fit Inko or Hisashi for that matter. Everything just felt wrong and I didn't understand why, but I went on with my life since I was just a kid who has no idea about the world. He shrugs, and once again settles himself better on the bench to look Hitoshi in the eyes again. A few days before I turned 8, I had told Inko that I wanted to be a hero. She said I couldn't be one, that it was too dangerous. I got angry so we argued too much, so much that I mentioned my quirk to her in the argument and how it would help me be a good hero and that it would keep me safe. She yelled at me saying that I would not be a hero and that my quirk was not mine. After that I just reflected how she has simply been controlling my life. I mean there are things I don't like, but she says I do. There are things I dislike, but she insists I don't. I would control where I go, who I'm with. The only people she would let me have freedom with were the Bakugu, and that was because my Aunt Mitsuki has been Inko's best friend since high school. So, I put together a plan. I would prepare to be a hero behind her back, do what I like when she wasn't looking and come up with made-up excuses. Hitoshi grimaced, nodding with understanding. I had enough with my classmates, you know? They said I couldn't be a hero with my quirk, but I was still excited when I told Inko and she just wanted to control my dream. So I decided to be Midoriya Izuku to her, and to the rest of the world just Izuku. That's bullshit, dude. Hitoshi expresses with a frown creased in disgust. Izuku just laughs bitterly. I've lived well, I've managed. He shrugs non-committally. I went on with my life. I went to different courses to prepare to take the Udare exam. A second choice would be Shiketsu. And then 3 days ago, I just came across another puzzle piece again and had to put it all together. Izuku then begins to explain to Hitoshi his discovery of the orphanage photo on his mom's laptop, about the 2 children hugging in the photo, about the year the photo was taken, how the 3-year-old Izuku looked like him and how Hitoshi appeared in the photo, distinctive purple hair and eyes. How did you come to me after that? Hitoshi asks him gently. Izuku then proceeds to explain. Backslash dash 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 backslash. Izuku managed to get a charger with Hatsi after asking her for it when he was at the dojo. He just couldn't wait to see her on Friday to ask her for it and have to wait until Saturday to get it. So leaving the dojo he headed to Hatsi's house to pick up the charger. Hatsi's father was the one who handed him the charger, saying that his daughter was busy putting out an explosion with the fire extinguisher. When he got home, he was silently grateful that Inko had not arrived early, so he ran straight to his room and locked himself in. Anticipation was not doing him a favor. He felt he was close to the pieces of the puzzle and just needed concrete information to get to it. Once his computer was turned on, he dove in, placed his cell phone to the side with the image he had taken showing completely on the screen. He bit his lip hard as he entered the browser and searched for the name of the orphanage. A good number of entries popped up, but he focused on the information tab first. Orphanage name, Hopes and Dreams. Inauguration, December 15th, 19XX. Directed by Ayama Hana. Founded by Ayama Hataru. Closed, November 12th, 19XX. Location, Muzutafu Shore, almost reaching Hokkaido. Izuku frowned at the closing information, looking back at the photo on his cell phone and reading the date, September 1st, 2XX. He was 3 years old when the photo was taken, and he was still 3 years old when they closed the place. A sick feeling had settled in his stomach, but he made the decision to ignore it. He quickly typed into his computer, "Closure of the Ayama Hana Hopes and Dreams Orphanage," getting another list of results, entering the first link that belonged to a news line that is still current. Izuku let out a gasp as he read the headline, that feeling in his stomach only getting worse. Orphanage, Hopes and Dreams is closed after the kidnapping of one of the infants. For a long moment, Izuku did nothing but read the headline, only to slide to the image on his cell phone, focusing his attention on the one note Inko had made in the publication. Found it. Izuku returned to the news again, this time, sliding the page to read the note. On November 12, 2XXX, the orphanage was closed by the authorities in the face of the negligence of the place, having allowed the kidnapping of one of the infants there. The abduction occurred on September 13th of this year. The abducted child was 3 years old, with ebony black hair and lime green eyes. The police report indicates that the child was abducted under the surveillance of one of the orphanage workers, who, according to her words, stopped seeing him for a few moments, only for the puppy to disappear, returning to the orphanage with only 3 children and not with the 4 with whom he had left. The investigation never led anywhere, the leads went cold and the case was closed. On the other hand, the orphanage fell into a state of emergency, announcing its closure. All the children will be put up for adoption as soon as possible, seeking the welfare and security they need after such a stressful event of losing a puppy they lived with on a daily basis. Izuku reread the brief description they gave in the note of the missing boy, and couldn't help but be bitter about it. 01 September, the photo was taken. 12 September, the post was saved by Inko. 13 September, Inko told her, when she was 8 years old, that September 13th was very special to her, because on that day she had found Izuku after she had lost him. Izuku sobbed in anguish, because he already had a part of the puzzle, and wasn't that what he was looking for? Doesn't that answer a lot of questions? But why must it hurt so much to know the answers? He let out a frustrated cry, slamming his open palms on the desk. When his cell phone bounced, his gaze returned to the screen, staring at his 3-year-old self, only to turn his gaze back to the purple-haired boy who had been hugging him in the photo. Did he have something else to discover? Backslash dash 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 backslash. As just an idea, I decided to see if I could get into the system the orphanage operated on, child records and all. If I didn't find anything, well, I would look in the police reports to look for the case and the listing of the children at the orphanage. Fortunately, I didn't have to go that far since the orphanage system wasn't wiped out. That's how I found the records that you and I. Well, we were twins apparently. We arrived on July 1st. At the gates of the orphanage, it said there that we were newborns and the only things with us were hospital blankets and the bracelets with our names on them. Izuku took a breath, feeling like he hadn't breathed the whole time he had been talking. Hitoshi looked at him in amazement. Do you know how to hack a system? For a few moments, they both stare at each other in silence until Izuku lets out a laugh. That's your question after telling you all that? Izuku questions with a chuckle, somewhat untangling the tightness in his chest. Well yeah, what do you mean you were going to break into the police system? Hisses Hitoshi, clearly offended by how amused Izuku finds it. It's easy. A few codes here and there. He informs him with a shrug, but Hitoshi groans and sinks back in his seat. You're a clever little sheet, aren't you? I have no salvation with you. Hitoshi laments, and Izuku can't help the happiness conveyed through his scent. Hitoshi then smiles at her for that. Well, now what? Hitoshi asks him once Izuku has calmed down. For a moment, Izuku contemplates the question. He hadn't set a plan for all of this, it just all started to come together. I think we try to figure it out however we can. Izuku whispers, turning his gaze to the pond, where the ducks are still bathing. Are you safe in that house, Toshi? He asks him softly, slowly turning his gaze back to his twin. Hitoshi smiles bitterly at him. I'm not, Izuku. He whispers back. Then we start there. Izuku tells him confidently. They will take this starting point. The puzzle is not complete, but more than half of it is already put together. Hitoshi doesn't hesitate for a second as he follows Izuku, who leads the way to the friend he mentioned. They both carry a couple of duffel bags each as they make their way to the train station. Izuku had been brought up asking an adult for help. At first, Hitoshi was reluctant to do that. Adults had never been on his side, so why would he trust them? However, Izuku swore to him that they were trustworthy adults, and Hitoshi trusts Izuku, because that boy is his brother. He knows it, he feels it, and that is more than enough to give his arm to twist. On the way, Hitoshi told Izuku most of what he had experienced since they met. How he was adopted by the Shinso in October, how everything had gone well being an only child, until his quirk manifested at age 5 and life just got hard. He told him about the quirk discrimination he faced daily, the constant indifference of the adoptive parents, and how he had to live in silence when he was in that house. He told him how the adoptive parents didn't return him to the system just because they received a monetary fund for adopting him. He told him about the few bullies in his grade, also about those who whisper behind his back. He told him about the negligent and incompetent teachers. And Hitoshi realized that it didn't make him uncomfortable to tell Izuku all that. Maybe it was because Izuku had opened up first, or maybe it was because of the familiarity they shared between the two of them and the experiences that became similar when they exposed them. But in the end, they had come clean with each other, which Hitoshi didn't find upsetting. And about this friend of yours' parents? What are they like? He asks curiously as they walk through a neighborhood he doesn't recognize, but which is clearly a good neighborhood. Oh, they're actually moms. She has 2 moms who are great. I've known them since I was 9, and besides my aunt and uncle, I trust them to tell them almost anything. Izuku says with a smile. How did you meet your friend? Hitoshi has genuine interest in the information. After all, life hasn't been easy with Izuku either, so it's a relief to know of which he was at least able to make some friends. Well, I don't know if I said it in my explanation, but I've taken different courses since I was 8 years old that I attend after school. Izuku explains with an excited smile, doing little jumps as he walks. I'm in mixed martial arts, parkour, gymnastics, computer science, and dance. I met her at the dance course. Izuku laughs a little as they turn a corner. You know those alphas who are extroverts to the extreme and are suddenly adopting strangers? Hitoshi snorts a laugh, sensing where that's going. Well, we hadn't even had our cast presentations and I already assumed she'd be an alpha, because who the heck runs up to someone and says, "Bush boy, I choose you"? Ida-sensei had told her that they had to pair up for the first 5 sessions, so Min decided to pick me just because she liked my bush hair. Hitoshi couldn't help the laugh that came from his lips. I was stuck with her forever, and when she introduced herself as Alpha and me as Omega, well, she declared that she had already adopted me and if anyone hurt me she would melt everything they loved. Hitoshi noted the fond smile on Izuku's expression, causing him to smile on his own. She found out about my quirk when I was 9, and I swear I feared the worst. She was my first friend, Kaken was my best friend since childhood because Inko and Aunt Mitsuki have been friends, so the 2 of us grew up together. But with Min, and then with Hatsi, it's different because they saw me, not my quirk, not the potential villain, not even a Midoriya, but Izuku. When I told both of them about my quirk, Min praised it for about half an hour and asked to be a test subject to know what it felt like. Hatsi on the other hand launched into a whole lecture about the practicality of my quirk. Izuku this time turned to Hitoshi. You don't have to worry about them saying anything about your quirk or discriminating against you, they both know how horrible it is. I think you should rather worry about ending up being another Min adoptee and being a test subject for Hatsi's inventions. Thanks for the warning, Hitoshi says with amusement. Izuku turns his gaze back to the road, a smile again lighting up on his face. We're here! He exclaims and picks up the pace. Hitoshi picks up the pace right away and soon they are at the entrance. Izuku rings the doorbell and it only takes a few seconds for the door to open. A woman with pink skin, emerald green eyes and pink hair with antennae on her head greets them. The woman gives off her scent, and Hitoshi immediately knows she is an alpha by her presence. Hello, Yumiko-san. The woman's eyes light up as she focuses on Izuku and she immediately bends down to kiss the crown of Izuku's head. Hi, sweetie. Are you coming to visit Mina? She immediately turns her gaze to Hitoshi, and the woman just smiles kindly at him. Are you a friend of Aizu's? Nice to meet you, I'm Ishido Yumiko, Alpha. Shinso Hitoshi, Alpha. Hitoshi replies in a low voice, maybe not a threat, but still wary. Yumiko-san frowns a little, without erasing her smile, only to turn her gaze back to Izuku. Honey, trouble? She asks him, lowering her gaze to the duffel bags, only to look into Izuku's eyes. Izuku nods. Can I ask you and Anoka-san for help? He asks in a knowing voice, and Hitoshi worries when Omega's voice wobbles. Always, sweetheart. Yumiko tells him sweetly, only to step aside a bit to give them a silent pass, so they both finally go inside. Hitoshi just follows Izuku, who has obviously been here countless times enough to lead them into the room with confidence. Have a seat, I'll call my pair. She warns them, only to disappear down the stairs. Izuku quickly takes a seat on a two-piece couch, smiling at Hitoshi in silent invitation, so the Alpha grants it and sits down next to him. Broccoli! Comes the booming voice of a girl, entering the room. Hitoshi is amazed because the girl is a carbon copy of Yumiko, except for her eyes, which are black and yellow. Min. Izuku says with a smile, getting up from his seat to catch the girl in a hug. The pink-haired girl confidently curls her legs around Izuku's waist, who giggles as she is trying to tousle his hair. They're always like that. Yumiko says, taking a seat on the couch next to what she assumes is Anoka, Yumiko's wife, and from Anoka comes the eyes that Mina possesses apparently. One day, they'll break something again. Anoka grimaces after the statement, but there is affection poured into the words. The girl suddenly gets off Izuku, only to turn her gaze to Hitoshi, looks him up and down, then at the moonbags and finally turns her gaze back to Izuku, this time, looking very serious. You said you were doing serious things and you found out about others? Are we helping you then? She asks him in a determined voice. By the way, pretty lime green eyes, did you wear contact lenses all the time or are those contact lenses? Izuku emits a soft laugh. Yes, Min, he whispers. Mina then nods, moving away from him to sit between her two mothers. Izuku then takes a seat and looks at Hitoshi still smiling. This is Hitoshi, and we have a history together. I wanted to ask for your help, more because Anoka-san is a lawyer and, well, I think our lives are not. Well. Izuku then shyly looks at the Ishido family, and Hitoshi does the same. Anoka's gaze is soft. Does it have to do with us not being able to pick up a herd scent on you guys? Or some sort of imprinting? She asks them gently. Hitoshi frowns as Izuku stirs uncomfortably beside her. My children, as an Omega mother I can sense it, an Alpha leader will sense it just a little, but we Omega parents can sense it best when the pups are marked with the sense of their families, regardless if they already have their own, caste presentation or not. Imprinting leaves the scent of the parents that other adults with pups notice. It has to do with that a little bit. Izuku is sincere with the answer though he sinks into the couch with slight uncertainty. Unconsciously, Hitoshi reaches out, taking Izuku's hand between his own. Izuku, Hitoshi, you can trust us with whatever you need. If you want to tell us the whole story and we'll keep the secret, that's fine, or if you want to just tell important parts, but not compromise, that's fine too. Regardless of that, I want you both to know that you will get help, understood? Yumiko smiles confidently at them. Hitoshi shares a glance with Izuku, who looks at him with genuine curiosity and a single question. Tell them everything? Hitoshi nods slowly and Izuku then straightens up in his place. What if Izuku tells his whole version, and Hitoshi is encouraged to tell his? Fine. Routine is something stable to hold on to in order to find balance within all that is going on. Of course, even that routine can break down and the only thing left is to adapt, but Hizashi is satisfied as far as possible with having a routine that works with his 3 jobs and having time to spend at home with his husbands. The calendar marks October 20th, and he hums with satisfaction as he reviews the itinerary they have written on the blackboard in a section of the kitchen. Shoyuta would have the first half of the day off, all for expelling an entire class of kids who apparently had no potential. Only Shoyuta would do that, while on the other hand he had patrol at 9 in the evening to finish at 3 in the morning. Oboro on the other hand would have to teach heroics to 2A, 3B and attend a rescue class as 13th support supervisor, so he would finish late. At least he didn't have patrol when that happened. Perks of owning your own agency. Hisashi, on the other hand, wasn't teaching English today, so he didn't need to show up, but those days without teaching were filled with days at the radio station, preparing scripts, rehearsals, and when it was known he couldn't be live at some session, doing pre-recordings to get them on the air. Today they will coincide to have dinner together, so the routine is supposed to go well. Zashi. He immediately spins on his feet, abandoning the cup of coffee he held in his hands on the counter because Shuta's voice is extremely serious, focused intently on the screen of his cell phone. Oboro is right next to Shoyuta, looking at his Omega with concern. Naomasa. He has said he needs us at the station. He says quietly, there's a vulnerability that startles Hisashi's heart. Oboro bites his lip as he slides a hand to Shuta's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze to ground him. He said they have a safe lead. Shoyuta finally raises his gaze, looking into Hisashi's eyes with fear and a hint of hope. Yes, routine can be broken and you have to adapt. Arriving at the station was an eternal wait. Shoyuta could barely process the fact that they were on their way to the police station, but he did process how long that was taking. At some point he hears Oboro talking on the phone. Shoyuta thinks he heard the mention of Nemuri, and when he gets out of the car, he realizes he was right as his friend is waiting for them at the entrance, wearing a huge purple jacket over her heroine outfit and her hair awkwardly tied in a ponytail. Clearly she had come straight out of the UA to arrive. She greets them with a slight permanent tightening of her lips, and follows them silently as backup as Hisashi takes the lead, Shoyuta and Oboro together in the middle of the other two alphas. When they locate Naomasa, the beta is talking to his partner Sansa, who is carrying some documents in her arms. Now, Hisashi calls him, getting the detective's attention on them. Their old friend smiles wearily at them, only to say something to Sansa and then address them. Hello, sorry to call you so suddenly, but I think you would want to be here for this. Naomasa says calmly, nodding for them to follow him. 2 hours ago, a woman came in, saying she knew I was handling the case of your children. He gently informs as he opens the door to an observatory of an interrogation room. The four enter and the detective closes the door behind him as he is the last to enter. Why would I know that and especially about them? Oboro asks menacingly, and Shoyuta reaches out his arm to take his blue-haired husband's hand. Shoyuta is just as anxious as his husband's, but he needs to take it easy because this is crucial. Shoyuta senses that it is. I got to the reception in time to hear her say that she was trying to amend her mistake and wanted to confess her involvement in Hitoshi and Izuku's disappearance. Shoyuta hears Nemuri's choked gasp behind him, as well as Hisashi's breathing stopping in an outrageous inhale, and Oboro squeezes Shuta's hand tightly, but the Omega can barely process all that because the person who had been involved in the disappearance of his puppies was here. I know you want answers, that you wish you could question her yourselves, but everyone here knows that's not how it works. I asked Kayama to be here as support for you, but also to keep you out of the room and the interrogation. But I trust you to respect my work, just as I respect your right to know firsthand the information that is recovered about your children's case. Hisashi and Oboro nod stiffly. Shoyuta takes a few moments to process all this, but in the end nods as well because he wants answers, and if he must bite his demon tongue to stay out of Naomasa's work, then he will. Shoyuta looks out the window at the empty room on the other side, hugging himself as Hisashi and Oboro stand on either side of him, their arms around his waist and lower back respectively. Nemuri stands a few steps behind, not invading the space of the three, but continuing to be comforting with his presence. The door chimes, and Shoyuta along with his husband tenses with anticipation as Naomasa enters with a woman handcuffed with cork blockers. The woman with fire-red hair and amber eyes takes a seat, her face directly towards the window where they can openly make out her features. Naomasa takes a seat with her back to them, and soon begins to recite the typical speech about introducing herself, explaining his quirk, the rights she has, and that the session will be recorded. The woman just silently listens to everything. Now, I need you to state what your name, age, caste, and quirk are. My name is Satoru Chise, I am 32 years old, an alpha, and my quirk is camouflage. I can make a curtain that covers me and whatever I want to make me invisible both visually and orally. Shoyuta grits his teeth, finding the answer as to how it was possible for his pups to disappear, and from the grunts of the three alphas, they also came to the same conclusion. True. Now, Saru-san, you came to the police station on a day on October 25th, 2xxxx, stating that you knew that I, Tsukachi Naomesa, was handling a case of missing children, am I correct? You are. Affirms the woman with her eyes fixed on the desk, nervously shaking her leg in an anxious bounce. True. Tell me, Saru-san, can you specify the case you are referring to and how you came to the conclusion that I was working on it? The case of Hitoshi and Izuku, puppies of the pro-hero present Mike, Loud Cloud and Eraserhead. Disappeared on July 1st, 2xxxx at 8 o'clock at night, stolen from their cribs at Mizudafu Central Hospital. I know that information backwards and forwards because I was the one who took the puppies that night. The woman recites, shrinking slightly in her seat with clear embarrassment. Shoyuta resists the urge to groan in anguish. Oboro and Hizashi only tighten it further in their grips, trying to establish some sort of comfort with this whole stressful situation. True. How did you know I'm the one in charge of the case? Because I hired a person with a network quirk, who can access, search and concretize information on the internet. I paid for his services. True. Why would you seek out the case managers of both puppies and literally turn yourself in? Satoru is silent for a few seconds, her face twisting with bitterness. Why I've lived with the guilt for so many years I just couldn't deal with it anymore. The red-haired woman whispers, looking up for the first time, her amber eyes filled with tears. I have 3 nephews, you know? They're only about 2 months older than Hitoshi and Izuku, and every time I look at them, God, I can't help but remember that pair I took out of the hospital and took them away from their parents. So I'm doing this out of guilt. True. Please explain the reasons why you subtract 2 newborns. Boogeyman, the underworld player. She says earnestly, and Shoyuta chokes with his breath, because that name belongs to a case already closed. Boogeyman was a villain of the darkest shadows running in the underworld, one who was feared and therefore untouchable, until he wasn't in the March 15th raid that same year that Shoyuta and Oboro were part of. The villain was left at a crossroads when a drag and gun exchange went wrong. The police had a mole in the ranks, and with that they pulled off a successful raid, or as much as possible, as the man refused to be caught, so he shot himself to end his life. Boogeyman is the one who ordered the kidnapping of the puppies Hitoshi and Izuku. Naomesa is silent for a few moments, noticeably tense from where he is being watched. True. It's barely audible, but that alone shakes Shoyuta violently. Boogeyman had been soured on the pro-hero Eraserhead. The woman begins to explain softly, lowering her gaze to the table once more. Eraserhead-san apparently managed to destroy an entire drag system that was making him good profits and lost several partners. So why not get revenge in the long run by taking away something that could tear him apart? He had ears in important places, so he discovered the vulnerability and decided to make him suffer in the long run. True. Shoyuta loses strength in his legs, almost collapsing to the ground were it not for his husband's grip. God, it was his fault. It was her fault that her cubs were missing, her fault for losing them, her fault for putting them at risk like that. Shoyuta snaps out of that spiral when the sharp tug of the pack bond brings him back to reality. It wasn't your fault, Shoyuta. Nemuri whispers through the bond, a feeling full of warmth and comfort. Then there's a pressure between his shoulder blades that he hadn't noticed before. The scent of ginger with borage reminds him of his friend's presence. It's okay, kitty, it wasn't your fault. Shoyuta can't help the strangled sob that escapes his throat at Hizashi's sweet words. A little more dragged back to reality, Shoyuta can feel Hizashi's lips pressed against the Omega's left temple. Come on, love, it's okay. Oboro hums softly, and Shoyuta can relax a little more as he is aware of Oboro's forehead pressing against Shuta's right shoulder. He finally takes a breath of air, trying to put his anguish and guilt in order. Through the bond, Tensei pulls and expresses his support for them. The youngest of the pack also pulls on the bond, clearly concerned. Shoyuta then pulls on the bond as well, thanking them for the support and finally returns completely. Hey love. He is greeted softly by Hisashi, leaning down so that lime green eyes are looking into his. Back to us. Shoyuta nods, straightening up once more and noticing how Naomasa is silent, looking over her shoulder towards the window. Satoru has stayed still in place, just staring at the table. Ready? Oboro asks patiently, and Shoyuta only gives him a brief nod. Namuri then moves, going to the red button on the wall and pressing it, which beeps in the interrogation room. Namuri must have pressed it when Shoyuta collapsed, stopping the interrogation for a few moments. Okay, Satoru-san, we resume. I need a more extensive explanation of the kidnapping and why you participated in it. I was a thief in the underworld. I needed the money to support my sister a year younger than me and took the advice of someone who suggested an easy way. I did jobs that were not dangerous and as little harmful to others as possible. My quirk helped with that. And when my sister was P-Argent, I was her main support. We survived as best we could, and after there were 2 of us for a while there were finally 5 of us. Then it all went wrong. Satoru paused for a moment, only to shake his head violently. That BSRD contacted me, found out about me, investigated me, and when I least thought about it he had assigned me that mission and what could I do? He threatened my sister and my nephews, and no one escapes the boogeyman, everyone knows that. Satoru sighs. He said it would just be a kidnapping, that he would ransom the pro-heroes and deliver the puppies. He was full of shit. All true. Can you explain the last statement to me? When I reported to Boogeyman, that FINGBSRD said to get rid of them. Like I was a vile murderer, she shouted in anguish. I've got 3 nephews, so hurting some puppies? Killing them? Damn it, I couldn't cross that line. I was never killed, and I wouldn't start with 2 puppies who I had done enough damage to by taking them out of their parents' arms. True. Sutterson, what happened to the puppies then? He had no eyes or ears on me due to the security Boogeyman had on the fear I possessed, so I ran with both puppies away. To a place that was once safe for my sister and me, and where I was sure that man wouldn't look because he would be so confident that he had disappeared the puppies that he wouldn't bother to check. True. Can you specify? Orphanage, Hopes and Dreams, run by a woman who was a mother to us, Ayama Hana. I left both Hitoshi and Izuku at the gates of the orphanage, where Ayama Hana picked them up. After that I separated completely, as I didn't want any chance of him finding out somehow. Satoru paused for a few moments, turning his gaze back to Naomasa. I thought they'd be fine, I could swear, but when I tried to look for them I couldn't find them. True. Did you look for them then? When and why? Also, what do you mean by not finding them? When I heard about Boogeyman's death, I had managed to get out of the underworld, and I had a decent job. Word got out, and I knew right away that I needed to find those 2 and deliver them to their family. I wasn't looking for forgiveness, I never sought absolution or for them to accept my apology, but I would unhesitatingly turn myself in for my mistakes. I tried to look up the contact information for the orphanage on the internet, as I didn't know if it would be the same as my time there, but when I looked up information about the orphanage, I discovered that it had been closed. I needed to find them, so I looked for Hana-san, and when I found her, I knew what really happened. True. What happened, Satoru-san? It was local news, but it's normal that it went unnoticed. The orphanage closed because of Satoru bit her lip. For a long moment, she kept silent. They kidnapped a child 9 years ago and that led to the closing of the place. The children were given up for emergency adoption after that. True. Naomasa didn't manage to ask a new question, as Satoru continued speaking. I looked up Hana-san and upon asking her about both of them, Satoru ducked her gaze again, shedding a couple of tears. Hana-san said that Hitoshi had been given up for adoption to a family, but Izuku was the child they had kidnapped. Shoyuta shakes his head vigorously, staring in disbelief and bitterness at the woman in the chair. True. Naomasa muttered. Hana told me how they tried, but Izuku had completely disappeared and they closed their case after a few months. Satoru said bitterly. She says that Hitoshi cried so much that sometimes Hana felt that the puppy would never stop crying, and she was always left distraught over the fate of the 2 of them and what the separation did to them. After all, twins? They are one half of each other, and I blame myself for how they suffered at only 3 years old. True. What did you do after that, Satoru-san? I've searched till I'm blue in the face, Tsukachi-san. I hired this person to sink into the systems and search for those 2 children, because I wasn't going to give up. I would never do it no matter how much I risked getting caught. She answers with conviction, looking Naomasa straight in the eye again. The bag that was in my possession contains the trail I followed of Hitoshi. You will be able to find in it that he was adopted by the Shinso, but he is not currently in their custody. Shoyuta stirs in his husband's grip, moving closer to the observation window, raw anticipation settling in his chest. True. Do you know Hitoshi's whereabouts? I do. On September 20th of last month, Ashido Anoka, a renowned lawyer, opened a child neglect and abuse case against the Shinsus. Currently, Anoka-san and his wife Yumiko-san have protective custody of Shinso Hitoshi. Satoru's expression softens. I know I can't find Izuku, not me at least, but I know that if I could get to Hitoshi, they will be able to. Now I just want at least Hitoshi to return to his family. True. Naomasa pauses, looking over his shoulder at the window, only to turn back to Satoru. We'll review what you've accomplished. We're done for now, Satoru-san. The woman nods solemnly and they proceed to talk about the consequences, but Shoyuta pulls the plug right away because they have names, a destiny, and Hitoshi. Hitoshi is within reach after 12 years. Shoyuta could barely contain the feeling that twisted his stomach as they walked home. A sense of dread combined with hope did not do justice to the event that was happening that Saturday. Naomasa was walking in front, while Shoyuta was flanked by Oboro and Hizashi. The former was wringing his hands anxiously. Hizashi, on the other hand, had no qualms about biting his nails. And all that anxiety was understandable because they were already here, and if fate didn't decide to F it up, they would soon meet Hitoshi, and if they can find Hitoshi, the universe knows he won't look harder for Izuku. We're here, Naomasa announces, snapping him out of his thoughts. Shoyuta watches as the detective looks over his shoulder at them, a silent understanding and camaraderie, only to turn to the door and ring the doorbell. As seconds pass, Shoyuta takes a few breaths because he knows he needs him for this. I'm on it, shouts a young feminine and energetic voice, only for the door to be opened by a puppy with pink fur and hair. Mommy, are you forgetting Dash? The girl slammed on the brakes at the sight of Naomasa, immediately frowning and tilting her head to the side in confusion. Mom, it's not Mommy and Hito. She calls towards the house, only to look back at the 4 of them. Oh, you're Loud Cloud. Broccoli is your biggest fan because his quirk looks a little like yours, says the girl with a huge smile, confusion abandoned. She doesn't stop and soon her eyes land on Shoyuta, only to freeze. Mina, why don't you ask who's at the door first? Ashido Yumiko questions, immediately arriving at the entrance and pulling the girl, Mina, behind her. The girl keeps looking at Shoyuta and soon has a frown on his face as if she is deciphering something. Sorry, Mina is still learning to be nicer to people. The woman looks at Naomasa first. Oh, Detective Tsukachi? Your popularity precedes you, and that makes me wonder what your visit is about, escorts included I see. The friendliness in her tone is not lost despite the comment, and soon the alpha woman is looking at them. When she looks at Hizashi she frowns curiously, but quickly moves past him to look at Shoyuta, and like her daughter, the woman stops on him, her eyes widening in wonder. Did you notice? The girl whispers behind her mother, looking from Yumiko to Shoyuta excitedly. He looks like Hitoshi even in the serious, grumpy and tired expression. Mina says excitedly. Shoyuta feels Hizashi shudder, but he himself is busy getting over his shock and processing the girl's words. Mina, hisses Yumiko worriedly, clearly noticing the reaction that got. The woman takes a breath of air, only to look directly at Naomasa. You're here for Hitoshi, a 12-year-old boy, purple hair and purple eyes? We are, Ashido-sen, Naomasa replies calmly. Yumiko then looks at them for a few moments with a serious expression, only to turn back to her daughter. Sweetie, go get your cell phone and go catch up with your mommy and Hitoshi at the market. Postpone coming home for another half hour and then come back, okay? Tell mommy that Detective Tsukachi is at our house and wants to talk about purple birds. The girl doesn't even ask, just looks at her mom worriedly for a second, only to then run inside the house. Shall we go into the living room? She tells them with a small smile, stepping out of the way and allowing them the passage to enter. They follow Naomasa, and when they are inside, Yumiko-san guides them. Be careful on the street, she suddenly shouts as a pink blur passes by coming down the stairs, only to hear the door being opened and slammed shut. Sorry to show up suddenly, Ashido-san, however, we couldn't wait any longer to look for you. Naomasa comments, taking a seat on one couch while Yumiko-san takes the other, leaving the couch for the three of them. No. Don't worry, Tsukachi-san, I think I understand where this is going, and truth be told, I'm glad it's at this time and not with Hitoshi at home. She states with a tired smile. Would you guys like something to drink? We're fine, Ashido-san, thank you. Oboro answers her kindly. The woman turns to look at him immediately. Yumiko is fine. The pink-skinned one watches them attentively again. I only recognize Loud Cloud. Are you two also pro-hero? Shoyuta nods calmly, ignoring the rampant pounding in his chest. Aizawa Shota, Underground Hero Eraserhead. I'm Yamada Hizashi, pro-hero present mic. His blonde husband introduces himself with a cheerful tone, but he hasn't stopped pinching his fingers as a replacement for biting his nails. Oh, present mic, that's why you looked similar to someone to me. Way to change. Yumiko-san tells him jovially, only to turn her gaze back to Shoyuta. Clandestines are hardly known, but I know from the name that you're one of the best in the category. Even though there's hardly an exact appearance for you, I feel honored in a way. The woman smiles brightly at them, only to wipe the smile off immediately, sitting upright and looking at them seriously. Now, I need to know why Hitoshi resembles you in every trait I'm analyzing about you, Aizawa-san. Yumiko-san, that's because Aizawa, Yamada and Shirakumo are Hitoshi's biological parents, replies Naomasa when Shoyuta kept silent to the direct question. The lump in his throat prevented his from speaking, but he didn't betray his firm stance. Yes, I guessed it when I saw them. Yumiko-san says seriously, only to look at Shoyuta again. I know the version that they were an orphanage from baby puppies. I know of the adoption at 3 years old, also of a kidnapped twin. I know of an adoption by some guardians who were in the end negligent to an innocent child just because of their quirk. So tell me, what's the part one don't know, which is, of course, the part about how some abandoned babies ended up on the doorstep of an orphanage. There is no accusation in Yumiko-san's tone, but clearly if she doesn't like the answer, the woman will fight them if their increased pheromones are any indication. Shoyuta represses the urge to growl at her, because by logic he understands the woman's position, even though the protectiveness the woman shows Hitoshi does not apply to him, not to her, but to them. To him. Hizashi then takes over immediately, explaining the story from the birth, the name of the 2 children, the stormy night, the disappearance, the rampant search and the loss of an impossible trace by a quirk of invisibility. Yumiko-san's expression softens in the course, listening to Satoru-chai's part, what he told them and how that led them to the Ashido house. Yumiko-san soon smiles at them with softness and understanding. Hitoshi is a good boy, maybe he has only been a little over a month with us, but what have we learned from him? I honestly admire how his heart is so good despite the discrimination he has suffered, and although he feels a bit of spite, he would never harm others as the world seems to have harmed him. Hizashi beside him covers his mouth, stifling a sob. Oboro is no better, wringing his hands tighter, but Shota stands still, absorbing Yumiko-san's every word. She looks at Shoyuta for a few moments, only to turn her gaze back to Oboro. From what I can see, in terms of expressions and features, Izuka looks like you. Shoyuta abruptly rises from his seat at the mention of her second son, looking at the woman with barely concealed astonishment and unable to keep his facade steady any longer. Izuku? Shoyuta questions her in a trembling voice, raw desperation and longing clinging to the broken pieces of his heart. Yumiko-san smiles at him, rising from her place to head to the fireplace and lift up some lying picture frames they never noticed. I've known that little boy since he was 9 years old. He became friends with my daughter in a dance class they attend together to this day. Yumiko-san is taking different picture frames, hugging them against her chest only to turn around again and approach Shoyuta, who slowly sat back down. Yumiko-san crouched down a bit in front of the three's armchair, not looking away from Shuta's eyes. "If Hitoshi is the moon, Izuku is the sun," says the woman with her voice loaded with affection, handing them a picture frame each and turning them over, without revealing the images. Although you should know, in those pictures, Izuku has dyed hair and has contact lenses, but that is due to a situation that has not been under his control since he was 3 years old and that we are still looking to fix. Shoyuta can't help but frown in anguish at last, but decides first to see his son and then find out better what's going on in his life. "Shirakumo-san, I recommend yours first, he's 9.5 in that one. In the second one, Yamada-san, he's 11, and in Aizawa-san's. Well, it's the most recent one and it's in a cat cafe together with Hito, Mina, Bakugo and Hatsum, all friends of Izuku and by extension also of Hitoshi." He explains with a smile. Oboro turns first, bringing the image in front of Shoyuta for Hisashi to see as well. Shoyuta doesn't suppress the sob that escapes her lips. Next to the Ashido girl, a boy with forest hair and eyes is holding a bronze medal in one arm aloft, while his friend has a silver one, both in the middle of an embrace and smiling proudly at the camera. Behind them, a woman with spiky ash blonde hair and red eyes carries a boy who looks exactly like her, both smiling wildly with remarkable pride, and next to those two is Anoka-san, whom they recognize as a renowned lawyer, also looking proudly at the children. "Oh, he's so precious," Hisashi whispers lovingly, reaching out his arm just to caress little Izuku's image with his fingers. This is Bakugo Mitsuki, Alpha. She and her husband Omega, Masaru, are like uncles to Izuku. They have watched over him for as long as he can remember, so their son, Katsuki, is the puppy's lifelong best friend. Yumiko-san explains to them while pointing her finger at the two blondes in the picture. "Anoka and I adored Izuku from the moment Mina introduced him to us. Quite the shy little thing who couldn't believe that Mina literally adopted him." She chuckled softly, looking at the picture fondly. "Hitoshi and Izuku don't trust the system or adults that much because of quirk discrimination, you know? But Hitoshi, though bitter at the world, wouldn't hurt anyone, while Izuku clings to being a ball of sunshine and rainbows, except when he's angry of course, but they both decide to take on the world by baring their teeth, so my wife and I are very proud." "He's got your smile, Oboro," Shoyuta whispers, watching his puppy's face with great fondness and longing. "Aren't we going to talk about the fact that he won?" Oboro said excitedly. "He clearly made them eat dust," he exclaims, bouncing a little. "Follow mine," shouts Hisashi, and Oboro immediately pushes the picture frame away to give the place now to the blonde, who extends his arm to show the picture. "Look at that little karateka." Izuku, dressed in a martial arts outfit, is standing between Mina, a pink-haired brunette girl, and Katsuki, as he extends his arms to the front showing a silver medal that he proudly holds in his hands. Mitsuki, a brown-haired man, Yumiko, and Anoka stand behind them smiling. A little competition in their martial arts course. The pink-ragged girl is Hatsum-chan, and the brown-haired one is Masaru-san. We took the kids to an amusement park. After that, I have many of their pictures stored. He looks so happy, Hisashi murmurs with a smile. Shoyuta hums in agreement, running his fingers over his son's face. When Hisashi slowly withdraws the photo, Shoyuta looks at the portrait frame face down in his lap. His heart races again at the anticipation, because both his sons are there. His two puppies are in that picture. Shoyuta picks it up and turns at once, only to immediately snort out a sobbing laugh at the happiness that floods his chest. Hitoshi and Izuku, his Izuku who now appears with lime green eyes that are almost yellow and ebony black roots that are eating up the forest green, both sitting on the ground pressed shoulder to shoulder, petting a black kitten that is on Hitoshi's lap. Hatsum is lying with her head in Izuku's lap as she lifts an orange kitten into the air. Bakugo is leaning his back against Hitoshi's entire right side, frowning at the kittens climbing up his legs, and Ashido is squatting in front of them, clearly being the one taking the picture while making a peace sign. Shoyuta can't help but bring the picture frame against his chest, pressing hard as his husband's hands press against each of his shoulders. I'll send you all the pictures I have. In the last month, we've gone crazy with photos so Izuku and Hitoshi can hold on to not only memories in their heart but also printed on paper. She tells them with a smile, getting up from her place. Shoyuta takes a breath, only to finally detach himself from the photo and hand it to Yumiko-san. Boro and Hizashi do the same. There is a respectful silence after that, which is broken when Naomasa speaks. Yumiko-san, you said you need to explain Izuku's situation. Is it a complicated situation? Shoyuta, Oboro and Hizashi look towards Yumiko-san immediately, and notice how she frowns a little bitterly. The woman's gaze goes to the clock on the wall. I'll send a message to Mina, delaying that pair in shopping for another half an hour should be enough for her to explain all the details. Yumiko-san says, grabbing her cell phone from the coffee table in the living room. Once she sends the message, she turns back to them. I didn't go into details about what Hitoshi went through, how Izuku found him, but I know every detail of that, and I can tell you everything, because you are them parents and you should know what you are dealing with here. Oboro and Hizashi nod firmly. Shoyuta hesitates some more. Clearly Yumiko-san will put herself in a delicate situation by revealing what Hitoshi and Izuku told her in confidence, but she's willing to that to keep them safe, so whatever she's going to tell them is sure to anger the three of them as parents of the puppies. Shoyuta nods and looks in Naomasa's direction, who nods understandingly. And Yumiko-san explains the whole story to them, trying to cover all the details, but without going on too long. And Shuta's heart can hardly bear it all the way. Hizashi strokes Shuta's back gently, the three of them in contemplative silence after hearing all the information that Yumiko-san possessed. Were they trying something to intervene in that situation? Bless Naomasa, he asks necessary questions in this kind of situation. We proposed it to Izuku, but he said he didn't know what to do yet, and both Anoka and I didn't want to suffocate the boy or pressure him to express his thoughts or feelings to us. Maybe to Hitoshi he told him, but we're not sure. We just repeat to him at appropriate times that if he needs to leave Midoriya-san's apartment, he can come with us and we will put him up at our place. Yumiko-san replies with a look of concern. Do you think dash? Shoyuta directs his gaze to Yumiko-san, a trembling timbre in his voice that brings Hizashi's throat into a lump. Do you think he would want to meet us? Or maybe he doesn't want to leave her? The vulnerability in his Omega's questions generate a sense of unease in Hizashi, because she's right. What if one of them pups simply didn't want to part with the woman who raised him for years? Perhaps it wasn't a healthy relationship and there were many wrong aspects to Izuku's upbringing, but they didn't know their beloved boy's thought process. Aizawa-san, he would love to meet you because if there's one thing I know, it's that he knows there are pieces to his puzzle that are missing and those pieces are you. She replies with a sincere smile that erases Hizashi's fears, and he knows those of his two husbands as well. Oboro seems to be about to respond, but suddenly a click is heard at the door and they freeze in their places. Come on, you purple-haired scarecrow, can't you be serious? Mina's voice comes from the front door. Mina, why that nickname? Asks a woman, the sound of keys ringing along with the sound of bags with many things. Look, pink-skinned alien, I think it's just practicality. Comes the voice of a child. Hizashi and Oboro abruptly rise from their place as Shoyuta does so, the three of them directing their gaze towards the entrance of the room that overlooks the hallway to the front door. The voices stop. Hito? What do you have? Asks Mina with clear concern. Hizashi feels his eyes fill with tears, the aroma of latte and lavender so familiar, it mends shredded seams in his heart. Shoyuta lets out a strangled mmm from his throat, and when Hizashi looks at him husband, he can't help but smile softly with sadness. His Omega watches the hallway with clear concern yet anticipation, waiting for the puppy to appear. A rumble sounds. Hitoshi! Shouts Mina in surprise, but Hizashi can't think of that as his puppy's scent intensifies. A dull thud and suddenly a figure appears with quickened pace, striding into the hall without thinking. Hitoshi enters and stares at them with huge fawn eyes. Hizashi takes his time to look at his son, because that's his puppy, the little one with unruly purple hair and a scowl, all on Hitoshi's face screaming that he's a copy of Shoyuta. And Hizashi enjoys that sight, finally letting relief replace despair and fear. He feels Shoyuta move quickly, circling the couch to get closer to Hitoshi, who watches every action of the ebony-haired one. Oboro then takes Hizashi's hand, and a glance out of the corner of his eye leads him to notice a teary-eyed smile on his husband's face. Shoyuta doesn't even think for a second to move, going around the obstacle that is the armchair, and stops in front of Hitoshi. He observes every feature of his face, being amazed because this is his puppy, with eyes full of light and hope, but also of fear and curiosity. This puppy that was in his arms and that has lost its milk smell to have a specific smell that Shoyuta would already know it would have, because he is its father, and fathers could always faintly perceive the smell their puppies would have in the future. Hitoshi! Shoyuta whispers in a trembling voice, unable to keep the tears from slipping down his cheeks. He raises his arms, bringing his hands close to Hitoshi's face, but without touching him, giving him a choice. For a while, Shoyuta would want so badly with his heart to hug Hitoshi and smell his scent. He needs his permission because he would never do something that would make his son uncomfortable, ever. Hitoshi looks at him for a few moments, seems to be searching for something in Shuta's eyes, almost fearful and desperate, as if he is struggling to understand, but then there is an agreement and Hitoshi leans forward a little, allowing Shuta's hands to touch his cheeks. Shoyuta can't help but smile, moving closer and pressing his forehead to Hitoshi's, who closes his eyes at the contact. Hands even smaller than Shuta's close around the Omega's wrists, clinging a little as if proving he was there. There is a pitiful whimper coming from Hitoshi's throat, and Shoyuta rubs his nose against his puppy's by way of comfort. Why? Hitoshi asks in a tearful voice, and Shoyuta opens his eyes to find two pairs of purple ones looking up at him in tears. Why do you feel this way? Who are you? Questions his puppy in despair, squeezing Shuta's wrists tightly. Because we found you and you found us, my puppy. Shoyuta whispers to him with all the love he has saved for Hitoshi and his brother. You are? Hitoshi's words are choked out in a sob, his eyes widening with surprise and a hint of hope. Are they our dads? He asks in a voice so small it melts Shuta's heart. We are. Sorry it took me so long to find them both, Hitoshi. He replies to his son, who begins to cry with more feeling, closing his eyes tightly. Shoyuta then releases him from his face, only to pull him into his arms to hug him, just enough to feel him, but also so he doesn't feel imprisoned. Hitoshi cries harder, but clings to Shoyuta tightly, burying his face in Shuta's chest, and Shoyuta himself sinks his nose into the crown of his son's head. You took so long. Hitoshi laments with his voice muffled against Shuta's chest, who can't help but cry more at his words. I'm so sorry, Toshi. So much. And Shoyuta will never be able to finish crying about it ever, because it took him too long to find his puppies. There's a hand pressed between his shoulder blades, and Shoyuta blinks to look to his left, noticing Hizashi, who smiles softly at him with tears in his eyes, only to turn his gaze to the crying child in his arms. He turns his gaze to his right, and Oboro is there, running a comforting hand over the back of his son's neck. Hitoshi shakes his head a little to look at Oboro. His alpha husband smiles at Hitoshi and the boy sniffles. Zuko smiles like you. The boy whispers. Oboro couldn't help the snort he sent back to Hitoshi at the comment. He also wouldn't help the growing pride knowing they see a lot of Oboro in Izuku. You have Shuta's grumpy face. He jokes with the boy, and it earns him that Hitoshi breaks away from Shoyuta a bit to stare at his ebony-haired husband intently, only to at last wrinkle his nose. Oh! The boy muttered, earning a chuckle from Hizashi, to which the boy turned his gaze back to the blonde. Wait, present Mike? He questions curiously. Oboro can't avoid it and laughs at Hizashi's dumbfounded face. Well, you certainly got that right, little listener. Hizashi says, replacing his astonishment with giddy mirth. Wait. The child emerges from the safety of Shuta's arms, and his husband Omega indulges him with a small smile. Hitoshi looks at Oboro again. Wait, you're Loud Cloud. He then turns his gaze to Shoyuta, frowning and looking at him suspiciously. Are you a pro hero? Shoyuta emits a small laugh and nods. A clandestine one, Eraserhead. He replies with genuine calmness, not the one he had been faking all along. Eraserhead? Questions the boy, and there's too much awe in his voice. You're like my favorite pro hero. I always follow the underground forums and you're like #1 among them. Shuda's scent intensifies full of happiness, her cheeks are dyed red and there's no reliable scarf to hide it, so her husband Omega has to resign himself to his fate. Well, actually Zuko is the bigger fan of the two of us. She says with a shrug. He told me he found out what Eraserhead's quirk was, so you're like his super favorite, the second one is Present Mike and the third one is Loud Cloud. Oh, irony. Hitoshi whispers the last as an afterthought and clear astonishment. Your brother seriously has us on a leaderboard? Hisashi asks in a playful tone to Hitoshi, who shrugs indifferently. You should ask him why you're his favorite, he likes to mumble a lot, he's like, super smart. There's a tone of pride in Hitoshi, which makes Oboro smile more than he has been. I bet you're really smart too, Toshi. Hisashi says excitedly. Seeing me and figuring out that I was Present Mike without being in my suit? That shows excellent deduction skills. He praises proudly. That he got it from Shoyuda and you, obviously. Oboro says to Hisashi with a smirk, getting a blush on their husbands' faces. Hitoshi snorts. Yeah, I won't say anything about that. He mutters, crossing his arms, only to look around the room and frown. Oh, Yumiko-san took everyone, he reports with clear disinterest. Oboro then takes in his surroundings, effectively noticing that they are alone in the room. Deep down, whoever it was that had the idea to give them privacy, he is grateful for it. Hey, Hitoshi? Oboro can't help but call out to his son uncertainty, turning to watch as the boy watches him with expectant curiosity. Can Hisashi and I hug you? He asks him with a soft smile. Hitoshi blinks in surprise for a moment, only to stop crossing his arms and nod positively. Oboro smiles at him, moving closer to his puppy and wrapping his arms around him. Hitoshi sinks into the embrace and it is as if he has always belonged there, fitting perfectly as he did the first time he carried him in his arms. He breathes in his scent of latte and lavender, unable to help but press his lips to the crown of his son's head, who hums almost inaudibly in comfort. Oboro marvels at his son, grinning like a fool at the deep love he had waited so long to give. Oboro lets him go after another minute of sinking into his thoughts, allowing Hisashi to take his place, and the blonde embraces the boy with enormous effusiveness. Hitoshi is perhaps unaware, but snorts a laugh as he clings to Hisashi tightly, his blonde husband's scent intensifying full of happiness, and Shuda's does the same. Oboro smiles, stretching his arm out to hold his Omega's waist and pulls them both in to cover his alpha husband and son in his arms, all joined together. Because this is almost right, and only one more piece is missing to complete this blissful moment. Only their little Izuku is missing to finally be complete. Living with the Ishido had made Hitoshi see what a parent-child relationship looked like and what he assumed would be normal. Hitoshi hadn't known that for a long time, his guardians, the Shinso, simply changed one day and Hitoshi had to adapt to that change while surviving quirk discrimination. The Ishido have always respected their space, Hitoshi's nonverbal days. When everything becomes too much, Yumiko-san takes it upon herself to translate his sign language to Mina and Anoka-san, and never shows that he is a bother to her. Mina is quieter on those days, deciding to just sit on a couch and watch videos on her cell phone with headphones while Hitoshi sits on a couch by himself, listening to music from his cell phone. Anoka-san makes cups of coffee with honey, and always gives one to Hitoshi on those days without saying anything, just with a smile of understanding. Yumiko-san and Anoka-san switched him to Hyosai school after an exhaustive search for a school that did not report quirk discrimination. They did not take long to prepare for his transfer, plus they opened a case against the boys who bullied him and muzzled him. Almost every afternoon since he moved in with the Ishidos, Izuku comes to visit after taking his courses. They tend to hang out in the room where Hitoshi stays. The Ishido and Mina wives usually give them privacy from each other. Izuku is more familiar with the house, so if they want a snack or a drink, he wanders around the house confidently, only to return to the room. Izuku has had problems with Midoriya-san because of his late arrivals to the apartment, but he just shrugs helplessly as he explains it, but never fails to come back. Being with Izuku brings a sense of security and home. They tend to cling to the contact, Izuku always has his head on Hitoshi's shoulder, or he himself rests his legs on Izuku's lap on those days when they only exist in each other's presence. So Hitoshi has learned in less than a month what a healthy relationship with your family means. And then, after a shopping day that dragged on at Mina's strange whim, it ended with Hitoshi meeting his birth parents. He had caught the scent at the doorway as they were taking off their shoes and arguing with Mina. He had a feeling of inexplicable oppression coupled with a kind of calling, confusion, but also belonging, and when he least thought about it, he was trying to process the fact that 3 men immediately captured his attention, eyes lit up and filled with tears as they looked at him. There was no explanation for that feeling that was making a lump in his throat, but it wasn't bad. These weren't people who would hurt him like other adults. There was an unnerving sense of familiarity, just as there had been with Izuku. And when Aizawa brought his hands close to his face, but didn't touch him, giving him the option to pull away, Hitoshi gave in out of pure instinct and everything happened. Now, sitting here in an armchair, between Aizawa and Shirakumo, with Yamada sitting on the edge of the coffee table so as not to establish too much distance, he processes what he has learned. A silent, sad bitterness chokes his chest, for if it hadn't been for that boogeyman, or that woman, so Izuku and Hitoshi would have grown up with their parents, would have had what the other children have had all along. But he can't hold on to that bitterness, not when things are going to change and now they're here, they found them and that's okay. Hitoshi turns his head to his right to look at Aizawa with a frown. Izuku is better with emotions and stuff, so I'll say something I know he would say and agree with. Aizawa nodded slowly, clearly confused. It wasn't your fault losing us. You know, it wasn't something you could control or anyone. He shrugs, trying to downplay it, ducking his head to try and cover the blush he's sure is staining his cheeks. There's a pressure on his head and Hitoshi looks up in surprise, glancing back at Aizawa, who has his hand gently pressing his head and smiles softly at him. Oh, by the way. Hitoshi squirms, inwardly cursing the blush on his face. Aizawa takes pity on him and pulls his hand away. Yamada in front of him just snorts a laugh and is also sure that Shirakumo muttered something like, "Mini shoulda," with a fondness that Hitoshi is not used to. When are you guys going to meet Zuku? He asks, not only as an attempt to get out of his awkward situation, but also out of genuine curiosity. Well, little listener, we honestly wanted to know your opinion about that. Yamada says with a slightly sad smile, which worries Hitoshi, so he sits up straighter again, scowling at the blonde alpha. Because of his situation with Midoriya-san? Do you guys know? He asks, then looking at Aizawa and then Shirakumo, finally back to Yamada, who sighs and nods. I think Izuku would be happy to meet you. I think I've gotten to know him well enough to know that he has a lot of feelings he can't process regarding Midoriya-san, and that's why he hasn't had the courage to ask Anoka-san for help and escape Midoriya-san's custody that doesn't even apply to Izuku. Hitoshi is silent for a few moments, thinking well if the next thing he will say will upset Izuku because it is not Hitoshi's place to say it. Midoriya-san swears too much that Izuku is her son and Izuku fears that in reality there was ever a Midoriya Izuku and that Izuku somehow became his replacement. Hitoshi can't help but grimace in discomfort as he recalls that conversation with his brother, how he was on the verge of a panic attack as he explained his reasoning to him. We can ask for a DNA test if Midoriya-san tries to insist that Izuku is his son. Shirakumo says earnestly. That environment is harmful to Izuku. If your theory is true, Midoriya-san has been placing enormous pressure on Izuku's shoulders just to make him behave like the son she lost. Hitoshi grimaces because he understands well, he has seen Izuku hesitate when there is something he clearly likes and takes a long time to take it or give in, a sort of initial awkwardness that is erased as the minutes go by. We can fix that later, don't you think? Yamada tells them with a smile full of positivity. I think that now, the priority is to meet Izuku and above all to give him the assurance that we are here to resolve the situation. Hitoshi can't help but wrinkle his forehead, trying not to snort because now he understands where all of Izuku's positivity is coming from. I take it back, Izuku looks like you too. He says with mock disgust as he wrinkles his nose, that gets a laugh from Yamada and Shirakumo, plus a snort from Aizawa. If you want I can talk to him first? I mean, truth be told Izuku doesn't like not knowing what to expect on bad On good days he can handle it. Suddenly approaching him with this can't be the best. Anoka-san can talk to him too. I think it would work just the same. Hitoshi soon takes it upon himself to pull his cell phone out of his pants pocket, opening the messaging. Can I tell them they can come in now? I think Anoka-san might know better what to do. Please do it, Hitoshi. Shoyuta replies. The boy nods, sliding the chats to get to Mina's and tell her they could go back to the living room. There is a loud noise and then the door opens and Mina runs up the stairs. I need to go, the pink-haired one shouts, and Hitoshi lets out a laugh as Anoka-san enters with an embarrassed expression at her daughter's actions, while Yumiko-san and a man in a beige trench coat follow. Sorry for imposing on us like this, Yumiko-san, Anoka-san, Aizawa expresses in a monotone voice. Not at all, we are happy to give you the space to meet. Yumiko-san replies with a smile. Mina and I decided to have a game of tennis with a paper ball while Tsukachi-san and my wife were talking about the case that will have to be opened for Midoriya-san, so the application of time was fruitful. Thank you very much for giving us space. Hizashi tells them with noticeable gratitude, standing up and giving them a brief bow. Not at all. We are happy to provide the necessary help, Anoka-san reassures them calmly. I think you'll want to meet Izuku now, won't you? That's right. Shoyuta replies, standing up next to Oboro so he can look in the direction of Tsukachi, Anoka-san and Yumiko-san. Hitoshi then mimics them, so he now has behind his back Hizashi, who puts his hands on Hitoshi's shoulders. Hitoshi has recommended first to talk to Izuku about us and then to meet him. Yeah, that should be a good idea. Anoka-san mutters with a worried grimace. Izuku has been under stress due to the situation with Midoriya-san, and I don't think being in a situation that he can't control is going to be positive for him. Oboro nods. We understand that, we just wish it was as soon as possible. Hitoshi could go get Izuku at the Bakuga's house and when they're on their way here tell him about the parents who just found them both. Mina exclaims, appearing at the bottom of the stairs and excitedly entering the room. He's with the Bakuga? I thought he was spending the afternoon with Midoriya-san. Hitoshi looks at Mina with a frown. Mina stirs uncomfortably as gazes fall on her. I was talking to him, apparently, after he came from the dance class at 12, Midoriya-san tried to get him to dye his hair due to his black roots being more noticeable. Mina bit her lip, all energy vanished. Aizu got frustrated, and apparently said something she shouldn't have said because Midoriya-san became hysterical. In the end, Aizu left the apartment and went to her aunt and uncle's until she has to come with us. Why didn't he call me? Questions Hitoshi with concern, opening his cell phone messaging to check his brother's chat. Immediately typing that he will go pick him up at the Bakuga's house to return to the Ishido's house and that he needs to talk to him. The message is marked as read, but Hitoshi turns it off before seeing if there is a reply. He said he'd tell you later, that you didn't need to be worried until he gets here, plus he claims he can handle it. Mina replies with a shrug. Idiot. Hitoshi whispers, because of course Izuku won't want to worry him. Language. Anoka-san, Yamada and Shirakumo call out, making him blush because of course. It's 3 o'clock. Hitoshi looks at the clock in the room, only to look at Aizawa. I'll do half an hour by train to go to Bakuga's house, and another half hour more to wait for the train. We'll be here at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. He explains. And by Aizawa's smile full of gratitude, he knows he did the right thing. Because it was hard for his parents, Hitoshi notices it in the way they don't separate from him much, in how Yamada clings to his shoulders as if he's afraid he's going to disappear, in how Shirakumo gives him sidelong glances so as not to lose sight of him. I'm going to my skating class, so I won't be here. Mina tells them with a smile. I'll be with Mina on it, Yumiko-san adds, approaching her daughter and placing a hand on her shoulder. Tsukachi-san and I can discuss with you, Aizawa, how we are going to proceed with Hitoshi's custody, since the case with the Shinso is still open and there won't be trial for another 2 months, but maybe with Tsukachi-san's help we can speed that up. Also discuss how to solve the Izuku situation. Anoka-san smiles empathetically at them. I know you are impatient, that you wish you could take your puppies home right now, but we must make this right for Hitoshi and Izuku's well-being. There is a hum of agreement from the 3 men, and Hitoshi smiles a little at that. I'll be here when Hitoshi and Izuku arrive, but I'll lose myself in the kitchen to give them space. She adds with a smile. There is finally a plan, and soon, the last piece of the puzzle will be put in place to complete it. Izuku frowned worriedly and uncomfortably. Obviously, Mina had told Hitoshi about his fight with Inko. If the way Hitoshi wrote him that she was going to pick him up at the Bakuga's house and that they needed to talk wasn't any indication. Hitoshi was direct with his messages. He liked that about his brother, but at times like this, Izuku cursed him for giving him anxiety. Oi, nerd, the old hag asks if you're staying for dinner or leaving. Katsuki snaps him out of his thoughts, looking in the direction of his friend who has entered the room. Toshi is coming for me, we'll go with the Ishidos. He replies with a shrug, dropping onto his back on Katsuki's bed to look straight up at the ceiling, his cell phone abandoned to the side. Anyway, you can tell the raccoon face that they can have dinner here if he wants. Katsuki growls, moving over to plop down on the bed next to Izuku as well. He said he wanted to talk, so I don't think that's an option. Katsuki hums non-committally and Izuku closes his eyes as he focuses on the smell of nitroglycerin and burning wood. The smell is soothing from the familiarity of growing up with Katsuki for as long as he can remember, so he relaxes. The old hag said you had a fight with Aunt Inko, but you didn't tell her why. Does it have to do with what you told me last week? Katsuki asks, turning his head to look at Izuku. For a few moments, Izuku is silent, thinking a bit about what happened a few hours ago. I got to the apartment at 12, and everything was fine. She asked me how my day was, and I told her that I learned new moves with Min, but afterwards, she said she had bought a new product that would last longer on my dirty hair, and said we should cover it up this afternoon. Izuku couldn't help but bite his lip anxiously, turning his head to look Katsuki in the eyes. She got angry, Kaken. Izuku hates how his voice breaks as some tears gathered in his eyes and contact lenses stung at that. She said she couldn't understand how I could be so disobedient, that she didn't understand how her son made her sad by not wanting to do what his mom wanted him to do. And then I exploded. I didn't mean to, but I yelled at her that the black hair was mine, that the color of my eyes was mine, and that she just wanted to hide them under dye and contact lenses, all because she couldn't understand that I wasn't her Izuku, that she was just using me to be the child she lost. Izuku couldn't help but sob, turning his head away from Kaken to look away and allow himself to shed a few tears. Then I felt guilty. How could I be so insensitive and ungrateful to her when she has been taking care of me in her own way all this time? I feel guilty for not being able to give her what she needs. Sometimes it's so complicated, but I also feel guilty for not being her Izuku. Other times I feel guilty at the thought of abandoning her, because does that make me a bad person? But what about the fact that she separated me from Hitoshi? Maybe if I hadn't been kidnapped we would have been adopted together, but then I feel guilty for handing her the guilt about that because Inko is a mother who had a lot of pain from losing her son and dash. Izuku. He immediately stopped his train of thought, refocusing on the red eyes of his best friend, who was watching him with deadly seriousness. Drop that sheet, you're not guilty, you're a victim. You're not Aunt Inko's son, and yes, that's effed up as is her Izuku being dead, but it's also effed up that she kidnapped you and forced you to hide your true appearance, took away your dreams and chose what you like as what you don't like. I like Aunt Inko, she must because she's my aunt and my mom's friend, but you don't owe her anything, not when she's using you to pretend to be the dead son she lost. Kaken. Izuku mutters bitterly at his friend's harsh and direct words, because he is right, but they also leave him with a sense of regret, guilt, and uncertainty. No, sheet, I'm going to say it because the other extras won't have the courage to tell you the truth to your face. What Aunt Inko did is wrong, to hell with being 12 years olds, I'm not stupid and neither are you, so shut up and think about what I said until your idiot brother is here. Izuku furrows his brow, turning his body in Katsuki's direction, who only snorts irritatedly, only to turn in his direction. Izuku then smiles a little and closes his eyes, both of them staying in a comfortable silence. Izuku says goodbye to his uncles and Katsuki, only to quickly walk out the door to meet his brother casually waiting at the gate. Hey, you seriously couldn't answer my messages? Izuku questions standing next to his brother, who arches an eyebrow in his direction. Shouldn't you have told me that you argued with Midoriya-san and came with Bakugo? bites Hitoshi with a bored expression. Izuku snorts, starting to walk beside his brother. Fair point. There's a silence between them as they walk at a slow pace, which is odd. Hitoshi has long, fast steps, but now there are pauses that puzzle Izuku. What was it you wanted to talk about? Izuku asks him, trying to get the conversation renewed. Hitoshi says nothing for a while, walking with his hands in his pockets and his gaze fixed straight ahead. Remember how we talked about looking for our parents? Knowing who they are and why we ended up in an orphanage. Izuku frowns, his brother's posture tense at best, staring straight ahead without trying to look Izuku in the eye. Sure, we said that once I finished the case of the Shinso and those guys who bullied you we would look for them, plus by then I would have finished the 4th phase of my computer hacking apprenticeship. Izuku replies, narrowly avoiding stumbling because he was concentrating on looking at Hitoshi. His brother hums in acknowledgement, only to establish another short PRD of silence. I found out why we ended up in an orphanage. Izuku stops abruptly and Hitoshi does too, but still doesn't turn to look at him. You know? How? Izuku feels a lump in his throat, trying to figure out what the heck his brother is talking about. We were born on July 1st and the same day we were kidnapped. Apparently it was at night and by a person who had a quirk that could make her and whatever she wanted invisible. The invisibility was not only visual but also auditory. Izuku has no words for that information. He opens and closes his mouth twice, only to shake his head. That woman's job was to kill us, but she took pity on us and left us at the orphanage, then she tried to find us. She did it with me. Did she just happen to run into you and tell you that? Asks Izuku with a bit of trepidation, because if so, wouldn't that be crazy? Would it make sense that your kidnapper would suddenly one day seek you out, find you, and tell you how you ended up in the orphanage where you lived 3 years of your life? No, not her. But someone else. I met them today. Hitoshi finally turns to look him in the eye and Izuku bites his lip hard when he meets purple eyes with tears. His brother takes a step closer to close the distance between them and places his hands on Izuku's shoulders. Zuku, our parents found us. Hitoshi tells him softly, a small smile gracing his lips. Izuku freezes, his eyes can't open them anymore and his mouth hangs slack, because that was definitely not something he expected. What? Izuku whispers, his heart hammering in his chest and a ringing dazing in his ears. Our parents found us, Izuku, or rather, they found me because of that woman and then they found out that you found me. Hitoshi smiles more and more and Izuku can't help but get infected by it. Is it serious? He asks because seriously, Izuku wants to verify that it's real because if so, at last the puzzle is complete, and all that uncertainty, those sleepless nights because of the need for answers could come to an end. Zuku? Murmurs Hitoshi worriedly, and it takes Izuku a second to realize. He's shedding tears, so he wipes them away with his wrists while his brother gives his shoulders a gentle squeeze. I'm sorry, it's just that the argument with Inko went really bad. I was so scared, guilty and tired, and Kaken was able to calm me down a bit, but if this is true. Are you serious, Toshi? Did they really find us? The words are jumbled, almost stumbling and unintelligible. Hitoshi sheds a few tears, sniffling a sobbing laugh. They did, Zuku, our parents found us. He whispers, leaning his forehead against Izuku's. Well, that's good. Izuku whispers, and there's a small sense of relief that makes him relax his shoulders. They're at the Ishido house, that's why I came looking for you. Hitoshi says, finally separating from him to wipe the tears on his face. Izuku does the same. So I'm dragging you there because they want to meet you, you know, I already had my turn and now you have yours. Izuku nods enthusiastically, taking Hitoshi's hand to start walking a little faster to go to the station. Hitoshi doesn't complain about it. What are they like? Do we look alike? What are their quirks? Oh, do they know everything about us? I guess Yumiko-san or Anoka-san told them what about our situations, which makes me nervous because I still don't know how to fix Inko, but I don't think it's bad that they told them either. It would be nice if they didn't have to worry about it though. And did they tell you their names? Hitoshi let out a laugh. Wait, Izuku, just a second and I'll answer. Promises his brother as Izuku drags them through the avenues at a good speed. First, yes, They told them everything you and I told them about our lives, so they know about my negligent guardians, the bullying, the quirk discrimination. They also know about Midoriya-san, the kidnapping, the fact that you're being forced to be a person you're not. Yes, they know everything and they are already looking for ways to, in my case, speed up the processes and in yours, help you. Hitoshi is silent, allowing Izuku to swallow that, because he was sincere when he said he wouldn't blame Mina's mothers if they told them everything, but he still felt a little uncomfortable for not having participated in that talk. Although also, maybe it was for the best. And I have several surprises for you about who our parents are. Izuku makes them run when the traffic light changes to green, and with that same momentum he drags his brother to get them to the station, dodging people. For a while, they don't speak again as they move through the crowd, looking for an announcement to check the train schedule. Upon finding it they smile as it would only take 10 minutes to arrive. They wait in silence in those 10 minutes. Izuku occasionally plays with their joined hands, swinging them back and forth, to which Hitoshi just rolls his eyes, but laughs fondly. When they finally go upstairs, they both sit in some empty seats, with very few people around them. 3. Hitoshi says abruptly, and Izuku turns to look at him in confusion. Suddenly, Hitoshi has a sheet-eating smile that sends shivers down his spine. We have 3 parents, 2 alphas and an omega. Apparently, I have the traits of our omega parent, the purple hue. I don't know where it came from, but I'll ask them when we have more time. Izuku chuckles. Grumpy-looking, who hasn't had coffee in 2 weeks and hasn't slept for like 6. He questions with amusement, earning a nudge from his brother. It's the truth. You're only 12 years old and you look like someone who was unemployed, says the one with the baby face. Hitoshi sneers smugly, causing Izuku to snort indignantly. Anyway, I'll continue before we get any further sidetracked, he says with amusement, and Izuku can't help the pout he makes. The hair you get from our omega parent, your eyes from one of our alpha parents, and your features from the other alpha parent, you're like a combination of all 3. Izuku can't help but smile at that, forgetting the earlier indignation. I think you're going to go crazy with the following. What, why? Izuku is curious about that statement, getting further into his brother's space to look him straight in the eyes. Hitoshi smiles mischievously. All 3 of our parents are pro-heroes. Izuku almost lets out a scream at that, but Hitoshi holds up a hand signaling him to stop. I'm not finished, Izuku. He tightly closes his mouth, because he needs answers now. Shirokamo Oboro, who is Loud Cloud, Yamada Hizashi, who is Present Mike, and Aizawa Shoyuta, who is Eraserhead, it looks like they are our biological parents. There is a silence where he digests the words and then, a what? Shouted by Izuku. Some people look in his direction and Izuku blushes in embarrassment, sinking into his seat while his brother laughs, because, is he serious? Izuku walks familiarly through the neighborhood without letting go of Hitoshi's hand for mere comfort. After getting over his initial shock, Izuku had talked non-stop with Hitoshi about having a combination of his parents' quirks, the fact that his favorite heroes were his parents as something ironic, and the excitement of talking to them about their quirks. The excitement subsided as they entered the neighborhood, going in quiet silence toward the Ishido house. How did it go, Hitoshi? Asks Izuku quietly, turning his steps a little slower. His brother also keeps up with him. I think I felt a lot of things, but when Aizawa hugged me everything felt good, you know? Like everything came together again and I was finally home? At my real home. His brother whispers contemplatively, only to then turn to look at him with a smile. I felt safe after many years, Izuku. Izuku smiled a little at that, only to turn his gaze back to the front, where he saw the Ishido house. Will you be there? He asks him softly with curiosity. Do you want me to be? I can also give you your space and be with Anoka-san. I've already had my time with them. Izuku nods. Don't go too far. Izuku asks his brother, squeezing his hands a little tightly. Hitoshi just hums in agreement, and when he least thinks about it, they are already at the door. Hitoshi is the one who knocks on the door and Anoka-san takes less than a minute to open it, only to smile at both of them and move aside to let them in. Just as they enter, Izuku freezes, forgetting that he has to take off his sneakers only to look at Hitoshi with wide eyes, who just smiles and shrugs his shoulders, already abandoning his own sneakers. Izuku feels a strange familiarity with the smells he senses from the room. There is a tug in his chest that wants to drag him into the room to find the source of the smells, because they are smells that give him an inexplicable sense of calm. They are like a call home and the promise of safety. The Omega takes off his sneakers roughly to walk down the hallway and towards the entrance of the living room, where Hitoshi is leaning casually against the wall, giving him an encouraging smile. Izuku's gaze soon wanders into the room in search of the owners of the smells, only to observe 3 men, and for an instant he forgets how to breathe because there is a sense of belonging and peace, broken pieces that didn't fit into the puzzle, but then are repaired and fit perfectly. Izuku can't help the strangled sob that slips down his throat, moving without thinking and crashing against Aizawa's chest, who immediately catches him in a tight embrace full of warmth. "Hey puppy, it's all right." His father Omega whispers to him, and Izuku sinks into the warmth of those words, because this was what was missing. This part of Izuku's life that felt hollow and misunderstood had been answered. Shoyuta can't help the wave of giddiness that sweeps over him, grinning like a fool as he hugs Izuku tightly, depositing kisses on the crown of his puppy's head because he is in his arms, within his reach, and above all he initiated the contact first, and Shoyuta is more than happy to reciprocate. Izuku stops hiding his face in Shuta's chest some time later, and Shoyuta unravels his arms only to place his hands on his son's cheeks, tracing with his thumbs the constellation of small ones on his puppy's cheeks. "Hello, Izuku," he whispers in a watery voice, pressing his forehead to his puppy's. Izuku hums, bringing his nose up to Shuta's to bring them together. "Sorry for doing that all of a sudden," Izuku murmurs, a blush covering his freckled cheeks. "It doesn't bother me in the least, love." He reassures him, rubbing his nostrils, which earns him a snort of laughter from his son. They stay like that for a few moments, feeling each other's touch, and soon Shoyuta gently pulls away, as Hizashi and Oboro wait their turn. Izuku seems to catch that thought, because soon his attention is fixed on both alphas, who had been watching them with love-filled smiles and teary eyes. Shoyuta snorted, taking a step away from Izuku, only for his son to approach the pair a little more tentatively until he made up his mind to dart around both alphas, who caught the boy in a tangle of hugs. Shoyuta moved closer to Hitoshi, slipping his arm around the shoulders of his son, who tucked into his side familiarly, resting his head on his shoulder and his nose close to his scent gland, so Shoyuta tilted his head until it rested on Hitoshi's, watching lovingly as Oboro was distributing kisses on Izuku's face while Hizashi had him by the hands, both squatting in front of their puppy. Izuku and Hitoshi look for affection in their first meeting, Izuku more than Hitoshi, and Shoyuta assures that they will fill them with affection for a long, long time, for the lost moments, for what they couldn't give them in those 12 years, for what they missed, but also for what they will get in the future ahead and where they will be together, in the place that always belonged to their children.